හොඳයි නමස්කාරය කියන්න පින්වත් හැම දෙනාම. බුද්ධං සරණං ගච්ඡාමි ධම්මං සරණං ගච්ඡාමි සංඝං සරණං ගච්ඡාමි ဒုတိယံ පි බුද්ධං සරණං ගච්ඡාමි ဒုတိယံ පි ධම්මං සරණං ගච්ඡාමි ဒုတိယံ පි සංඝං සරණං ගච්ඡාමි တတိယံ පි බුද්ධං සරණං ගච්ඡාමි တတိယံ පි ධම්මං සරණං ගච්ඡාමි တတိယံ පි සංඝං සරණං ගච්ඡාමි පාණාති පාතා වේරමණී සික්ඛාපදං සමාදියාමි อดินนาดานาเวรมณีสิกขาปดังสมาธิยามิกาเมสุมิจฉาจาราเวรมณีสิกขาปดังอากาสัตตาจบุมมัตตาเดวานาคาไมติกาปุญญันตังอนุโมดิตวาจิรันรักขันตุโลกสาสนอากาสัตตาจบุมมัตตาเดวานาคาไมติปุญญันตังอนุโมดิตวาจิรันรักขันตุเดสนังอากาสัตตาจบุมมัตตาเดวานาคาญาตังจิรันรัตุตาอิดัมเมญาตินังโหตุสุขิตาหุนตุญาตโยอิดัมเมญาตินังโหตุอิดัมเมญาตินังโหตุสุขิตาหุนตุญาตโยอิมินาปุญญกัมเมนะมาเมสตังสมากโมตุยาวนิมบานปัตติอิดัมเมปุญญังอาสวัคคยาวังโหตุสัมเบดุกขาปมุญจตุ
Buon pomeriggio, mi chiamo Filippo Scianna e sono attualmente il presidente dell'Unione Buddista Italiana. A nome del Consiglio Direttivo dell'UBI ho il privilegio di darvi le benvenute e i benvenuti a questo incontro in occasione del VESAK che si svolge oggi come da intesa con lo Stato italiano. Il VESAK è la ricorrenza più importante in cui la comunità buddista celebra ogni anno la nascita, l'illuminazione e il trapasso o paranirvana del Buddha. Voglio cominciare con un saluto a tutti i membri del Sangha, ai maestri, alle guide spirituali dei 60 centri facenti capo all'UBI. Un saluto ai responsabili dei centri di Dharma, direttori, presidenti, membri dei CDA, persone che aiutano a vario titolo i centri e che hanno vissuto mesi non semplici. Grazie al loro impegno, alla loro motivazione, i centri hanno potuto preservare e mettere a disposizione insegnamenti e occasioni di pratica. Momenti, tempi, spazi che seppure da remoto sono stati particolarmente preziosi in questi mesi di isolamento o semi-isolamento. Un saluto in generale a tutte le persone, buddiste o non buddiste, che stanno seguendo questo evento o lo seguiranno nelle prossime ore o nei prossimi giorni. Oggi è una celebrazione di una ricorrenza religiosa e ci fa molto piacere avere sentito vicino le altre confessioni religiose. In particolare abbiamo potuto ricambiare il saluto del Pontificio Consiglio per il Dialogo Interreligioso, per il messaggio ricevuto che testimonia e rinsalda la vicinanza e il comune sforzo a servizio della famiglia umana. Anche le istituzioni ci sono state vicine, a partire dal Capo dello Stato che stamani ci ha inviato i suoi saluti e auguri. E poi è arrivato anche il saluto della Presidenza del Consiglio e siamo lieti di una richiesta giunta dal Presidente del Consiglio di poter avere una relazione con gli spunti che emergeranno dagli incontri di oggi. E questa richiesta ci fa particolare piacere, risponde anche, non solo, ma anche al senso di questi incontri. Sentire la voce, le diverse voci della società su specifici temi e nel contempo mettere a disposizione quello che è un patrimonio di saggezza millenaria, con l'auspicio e la fiducia che questo contributo possa impreziosire il dibattito. Normalmente prima della pandemia abbiamo celebrato il VESAK con momenti legati alle pratiche, ai momenti più rituali, meditativi, più attinenti agli aspetti cultuali e confessionali. Ora, per le comprensibili ragioni, questa parte è gestita in questi giorni dai singoli centri e questo ci porta a ricordare che pur in un giorno di festa e di celebrazione è innegabile il dispiacere di non poter essere in presenza, di non poter essere vicini. E questo è anche il momento di ricordare qualcosa di più ampio, le vittime di questo anno e mezzo. Non solo le persone che ci hanno lasciato, ma tutti coloro che hanno sofferto, padri, madri, figlie, parenti, amici che hanno perso i loro cari. Persone che hanno perso il lavoro, persone che hanno vissuto un isolamento forzato che ha penalizzato particolarmente le persone più anziane e anche le giovani generazioni rispetto alle loro esigenze di studio, di socializzazione. Ed evidentemente un pensiero di gratitudine va a tutti coloro, medici, operatori sanitari, sociali, a tutte le organizzazioni che hanno fatto dei veri e propri miracoli per limitare e attenuare le conseguenze dirette ed indirette di questa pandemia. L'UBI c'è stata, è stata ed è vicina a molte di queste organizzazioni grazie al contributo dell'8 per 1000 che abbiamo ritornato al territorio sotto forma di aiuto concreto, economico, a moltissime organizzazioni, premiando e sostenendo gli sforzi di chi è stato ed è in prima linea in questa emergenza planetaria. E di emergenza planetaria si parla. Quindi lasciate che il mio pensiero vada per qualche secondo all'India, che è una terra verso la quale ci lega come buddisti un debito di riconoscenza importante. Le immagini che continuano ad arrivare sono drammatiche e l'UBI è intervenuta nei limiti del possibile, sostenendo diverse organizzazioni che si sono adoperate per limitare il rischio di contagio e offrire assistenza medica ai contagiati. Questa pandemia ha indubbiamente condizionato la vita di tutti. Il tema di discussione e anche il tema di discussione dell'anno scorso e anche quello di quest'anno, durante il VESAK. L'Unione Buddista ha quindi deciso di dedicare il VESAK 2021 al tema della sostenibilità in relazione ad una generale crisi di una dimensione di senso dell'esistere e una progressiva fragilità del pianeta. Siamo mossi dalla convinzione che mai come oggi sia necessario passare da una visione antropocentrica a un nuovo ecocentrismo, costruendo nuovi modelli di sostenibilità e di cultura ambientale. Una nuova prospettiva che assegni alla Terra un vero e proprio status sul presupposto del riconoscimento dell'interdipendenza di ogni forma di vita, per arrivare poi a una tutela concreta dell'ecosistema. E da qui un sentimento, un impegno per la divulgazione di una nuova cultura che si esprima in termini di diritti della terra, di tutela del regno animale e di nuovi modelli di intervento etico, sociale e di impresa che guardino al presente anche come all'eredità delle generazioni future. E da qui la volontà di mettere attorno a questo tavolo, ahimè solo virtuale, ma comunque prezioso, esperienze, idee, proposte che vengono da diverse aree della società, non solo italiana, e da personalità che hanno dimostrato sul campo un impegno preciso, concreto, all'interno di quei principi di cui ho appena detto. Quindi abbiamo invitato personalità di varie aree della società italiana per scambiare e condividere idee, prospettive, input, in una logica di approfondimento knowledge,
reciprocal knowledge, and deepening the knowledge that we all have. We have many connections with organizations as the Italian Buddhist Union. We are also very connected to the European Buddhist Union, so I will now give the floor to the president of the European Buddhist Union. I wish to thank him also for his availability.
Thank you so much, Filippo, and thank you to the council and the members of the UBI. And dear friends, it's a great honor, and I'm very pleased to have the opportunity today to speak to you a few words on behalf of the European Buddhist Union, especially because today is a day to honor and revere Shakyamuni Buddha, who is our greatest guiding light. And as president of the European Buddhist Union, I warmly welcome you to this event, and I'm happy to transmit to you the best wishes of the European Buddhist community. Speaking here now at this event organized by our friends, the Italian Buddhist Union, I find it appropriate to say a few things about unity and its meaning, even though, of course, I know that today's topic is impermanence, but really everything is better if we are together. Of course, as Buddhists, we know that on a deeper level, we are all united. We are never separate. Especially as human beings, we are one family. And the more we realize and live according to this truth, the more we will achieve world peace, and we will be able to live in harmony and prosperity. Being Buddhists and followers of the Buddha Dharma, these goals are always present in our minds. And when it comes down to the level of a Buddhist union, and I'm of course the president of the European Buddhist Union, so I have to use a few words on this, there's also much meaning here. Because together we are able to achieve many things which we are not able to achieve on an individual level or even a Sangha level. There are many issues that I have in mind when I talk about this, and we can tackle them much more successfully collectively than we can individually. Especially when we want to serve society as a whole and benefit the countries where we live on a broad level, we have to get together. And I can give you many examples, but here's one. The Italian Buddhist Union is very generous, and they fund the work of the European Buddhist Union on the European level. So when we collaborate with the European institutions, both in Brussels and in Strasbourg, and we started this year. And because of this, we are on a much more professional level than we have ever been before. And when we talk to the European political institutions, we are just really much better than before. And one of the results is that they really do listen to us, and they take our suggestions seriously into account. We have, of course, many topics, like the topics that will be talked about today: ecology, animal welfare, migration, all the great topics of our society today, education, security for places of worship, and Buddhist, especially in our case, Buddhist communities. Even technical aspects like artificial intelligence and the ethical dimension of it, as well as many other relevant topics. As Buddhists, we have a holistic, but also a very practical and down-to-earth and reasonable approach. And I'm very happy to tell you that the people we talk to, they appreciate that, and they listen to us. And we talk really to the highest levels when it comes to the European institution. We talk to the commissioners, we talk to vice presidents of the Commission, the vice presidents of the EU Parliament, and even the president of the EU Parliament himself. So we are on a very high level. And nowadays, people are sincerely interested in the Buddhist perspective. And I can tell you that they do take us seriously, and they really listen to us. So we are on a good path, and I want to thank you all for that. I want to thank all the people who are behind this event, who organized it, and I want to thank all of you for participating today, because it is this spirit of friendship and mutual support that keeps us going. And let's work together for the benefit of all sentient beings. Today will be a day of many important speeches from prolific speakers. I'm very much looking forward to listening and being part of it. And I wish you a great day and all my best wishes in the Dharma. Thank you very much.
Grazie Ron, thank you so much. See you soon. Allora, bene, per me adesso è il momento di, con piacere che
It's a pleasure for me now to introduce Silvia Francesco. Silvia Francescone
esperienza è stata
has had a big role in organizing today's meeting. She's been practicing Buddhism for 25 years. She's an expert in environmental matters. She's a member of the ministry, and she participated in the G20 in October. She will be participating in the climate conference in November. So she has a role in terms of increasing awareness on these topics. So thank you very much for accepting this role and for your contribution. She will be the moderator and she will introduce every speaker and thank them all after the end of the day. Thank you very much for your kindness, for your availability, and thanks to all participants for their enthusiasm. It's a pleasure to have you all here today. We hope that our cooperation and exchange will continue in the future. So over to you, Silvia. Welcome. Good meeting and good VESAK to all of you. Thank you.
Grazie di cuore.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Filippo. Thank you very much, really.
Benvenuti anche da parte mia.
Welcome you all on my behalf, of course. It's a very important and precious day for all of us, such as VESAK. It's a virtual Sangha, the one we are going to have this afternoon. Well, as was anticipated, the day will be totally devoted to the earth. And so, unquestionably, to each and every one of us. The program is very rich, very dense. So without any further ado, I will introduce the first guest of today's meeting. The topic is anthropocentrism, from anthropocentrism to ecocentrism, economics to the service of people and our planet. The view is such that the individual is no longer at the heart of a system, but it's an integral part of an ecosystem that, of course, individuals interact with in a relationship of mutual exchange. There is interdependence, and humans can no longer consider themselves as owners of the ecosystem. We'll have two speakers, Professor Edoardo Croce from the Bocconi University. I see you. Welcome. And good afternoon. Professor Edoardo Croce from the Bocconi University of Milan is also the coordinator of the Green Economy Observatory. Thank you for participating. And then we will have Francesco Picciardo, Secretary General of the Forum for Sustainable Finance. Good afternoon, both of you. I'd like to anticipate the topic we are going to discuss, and then I will hand over to you. It's been a long time. It's been many years, I would say, that we've been talking about sustainable development. The view presented by Greenland that dates back to 30 years ago. And it was a sort of intergenerational agreement, I like to call it that. By sustainable development, we mean the possibility for the current generations to fulfill their needs and expectations without, however, to compromise the needs and expectations and aspirations of future generations. But we're also faced with some sort of crisis or multiple crises connected to one another. Of course, the climate and environmental crisis is one, social crisis because there's a widening of inequality gaps, and then economic difficulties. 30 years ago, we were already talking about sustainable development, but today we're faced with this multiple crisis. And so obviously it seems that something has gone wrong in the system. We could admit that. So today's meeting is not aimed at focusing the attention on what went wrong, although of course it is important to understand the mistakes that we made in the past, but the goal is to see what action may heal this system in crisis. I mean, moving from emergency to curing the situation. So once again, welcome to our guests. I'd like to start with a question for you. What is the meaning of economy to the service of people and to the service of the planet? The question is for both of you, but I'd like to start with Francesco Picciardo for your considerations on the topic. Thank you. Thank you very much, Silvia, and thank you all. I'm really happy to be here with you today. I'd like to thank also Filippo and Shanna for inviting me here. And I wish you good VESAK to all of you to begin with. I deal with sustainable finance with Edoardo. He's a friend. We've been working a lot together, both on issues of environmental policies and also in terms of trying to find quickly a different development model as compared to the one we've been following until today. You already mentioned the Brundtland report, which is more than 30 years old. We went through Rio de Janeiro. We went through many statements on sustainable development, and then unavoidably, in 2015, with COP21 in Paris, we realized that there was no way to go back. So we needed to act and to act quickly, very quickly. What I'm offering to you is a few initial remarks, and then I'd like to share my viewpoint on some of the potential solutions to the problem, just to remain in the spirit of, pragmatism, which is typical, I would say, it characterizes this event. My remarks have to do with the situation that we live in today. The situation is fairly complex, where a lot of issues are being questioned. First of all, inequality, the topic of the inequality. Inequality is the basis of everything. Unfortunately enough, in 2015, it was mentioned among the 17 Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. It's one of the most important goals. And at the moment, the practices of inequality, non-discriminatory practices, are the topic that we should reflect upon. I'd like to be brief without taking too much time from you. It's important, however, to understand that the social and economic consequences of this pandemic have contributed to widening the gap and making some inequalities worse, both on a worldwide level and on a national level. COVID puts us in front of a crossroads. Those who were worst off are even worse, and that's a key point. Let me quote the Sustainable Development Outlook of 2020 of the United Nations. It indicates 120 million people likely to become poor, assuming that the income doesn't decrease. Hunger will increase the number of people facing food emergencies. Will get worse, increasing the number of people suffering from hunger to 260 million soon. I mean, this is a bit sad, but it's important for us to understand what solutions can be implemented. Silvia, please stop me if I'm speaking too long. There are other sources of, reflection, and I'm proceeding with bullet points. Work emergencies, inequalities at the workplace are increasing globally, especially among poor workers who depend on a daily salary. I mean, these workers were already precarious before the crisis, and again, insecurity is increasing. This is a very important topic. In addition to poverty, there are two topics that I believe the Buddhist community can play a role in. Insecurity and vulnerability are two major topics. Both are getting worse. The UN and the Labor Organization estimates that 240 million jobs have been eliminated, considering that most of them are works carried out by foreigners, by migrants. It's even worse. That's another point. A couple of more points very quickly before moving to the solutions. Maybe I will share the solutions in a second round after we hear from Edoardo. Another topic is innovation and technology. It's undoubtful that the development of platforms and technology and high tech helped us all during this period of time. This event itself is very much based on these platforms, but we should be careful, because there is something that we call digital divide, which is the poor access to technology and to the internet in some areas. Let's make an example. India, since we do want to support this country, 600 million individuals, 60% of the people there have no access to the internet. In many African countries, it's even worse. This gap is also increasing in countries such as the US, rich countries such as US, especially if you talk about race, income, and peripheral location of populations that have no access to technology. So digitalization is one of the key topics of Next Generation EU, but careful. Technological development without social inclusion will not be sustainable. So with this, I will close this first part. I will close by mentioning two topics. One is distribution of wealth, and the other one is gender inequalities. These are also very important elements. Now, distribution of wealth, to be short, just think that with the pandemics, the super rich in the United States have become even richer. The virus has increased the US assets, which grew by $260 billion from 2,950 to 3,800 billions. Jeff Bezos, the head of Amazon, everybody knows him, has increased his assets from 73 billion to 186. So this makes us think of how a drama caused an increase in wealth. So the redistribution or the dampening mechanism of this super profit should be probably rethought. I will close with gender inequality. The social impact of the pandemics involved mainly women. They affected women everywhere, women and young women especially. It's estimated that in 2021, due to the COVID effects, 47 million women more worldwide will live in poverty.
La maggior parte di disoccupate,
the majority of unemployed people due to COVID were women. Women who are also suffering from more precarious jobs than men, having also many other tasks to perform. Tasks in terms of managing the family, which is mainly, unfortunately, left to women. I will close by saying simply that these are the elements that we should start from to then come to some tangible proposals. In addition to women, we have the millennials and immigrants. These are the categories in which I would like to invest. I'm not thinking of supporting them, just providing financial aid. We should invest in these categories because these are exactly the categories that may relaunch a society and take us to a new model of development. Sorry for taking so long, and I will try to be briefer later on, because I want to take a positive view, not just these negative facts. Thank you, Francesco. You were perfect. You touched upon important topics. We'll then move on to the part of curing these diseases, so to speak. As we know from our teachings, you need to first become aware and then find the method for treating our critical issues. Thank you for touching these fundamental topics, and thank you for raising the gender issue, which is not just a question of helping women, but through social inclusion of women, the whole country, the whole community will benefit. This must be very clear. It's not just a question of justice. It is, of course, a question of justice, but it's also a question of economic intelligence, so to speak. And then you talked about investing on people. You referred to immigrants, for instance, you referred to youth, and you also mentioned innovation, which should not become a divide, but it should also not be for its own sake. That's why we talked about economics and the service of people and the planet, because if technology and innovation improve and develop for their own sake, we're not taking the right path. Of course, they have to serve people and serve the planet. And this gives me the opportunity to ask Professor Eduardo Croce to share his views. Thank you. Thank you for your invitation, and good VESAK also on my part. I agree with the approach mentioned by Francesco. I think that today there is awareness, and this is good, awareness of the problems of the planet and the relationship between the environment and the economy. We know that there are planetary limitations, global critical issues, which are the biogeochemical cycles that are at the basis of the life of the planet, biodiversity, excessive consumption of raw materials, the use and transformation of lands, which changed the face of our planet, and of course, climate change, which is a phenomenon before everybody's eyes, with more than 1 degree Celsius in temperature increase over the planet, with major and obvious consequences. Now, from this standpoint, economists call them global commons. They're global, but also common to the planet. Then we will talk about solutions, but they require common interventions and responses that must be differentiated based on historical realities, based on abilities, based on the answers the institutions and companies, but also citizens and each of us may give. Francesco mentioned the topic of inequalities. I will now probably focus on the topic of energy and climate, which are connected with an aspect where inequalities are obvious. Just think that the richest 1% of the population accounts for 15% of global greenhouse gases emissions. So the situation is really imbalanced, whereas 50% of the poorest population accounts for only 7% of emissions. This is indicative of the fact that there are not just national inequalities and differences, there are responsibilities and inequalities in terms of income and lifestyle. Of course, there are major territorial differences too. Now, once again, referring to energy and the climate, we know that there is almost 1 billion people who still have no access to modern energy systems. They don't have electricity in the house. They don't have systems for cooking that we're used to, quite common in our countries. And so these populations, half of them are in sub-Saharan Africa, 200 million of them are in India. So they're concentrated in very specific areas of the planet, and they have a right to development, which cannot be the type of development followed by industrialized countries, which we know is not sustainable. So it must be a totally different kind of development. Once again, this takes us to reflect on how energy transition or environmental transition should be implemented. It's a transition that involves economic, social, and energy transition. Agenda 2030, which was approved in 2015 when Agenda 2030 and the Paris Agenda were approved. This gives us a guidance on a global level that then must be implemented on a national level, but also the level of companies and individuals it's a common guidance that may help us all to tackle the issue. Thank you very much. Once again, we touched upon the crucial issues. What I appreciate most is this global view. Of course, climate change is global by definition, which must be solved in a global manner, and that's obvious. But the impact of that are particularly felt in specific parts of the world. And in fact, we hear mitigation of climate change or reduction of emissions. That's what we hear, but for many other countries in the world, the situation is already one of adaptation. I mean, systems allowing these populations to somehow survive. And for sure, those who are suffering most from climate change are the poorest people in the world. Agenda 2030 could be a governance plan. You can take it and implement it without changes, because per se it's already an agenda, a program. I'd like to go back to Professor Croce. You were also a counselor for mobility, transportation, and the environment of a very important city, namely Milan. So maybe we can start discussing solutions, or at least proposals for solutions. Another effect of climate change is obviously pollution. The WHO indicates millions of people who die every year. They're less visible, if you will, because those dates occur over a longer period of time. However, if I'm not wrong, in Italy, 87,000 people are estimated to die every year due to air pollution. So you mentioned people with their own skills, with different skills. Now, what is the role of citizens and the role of cities in fighting climate change? Well, in Rio de Janeiro in 1992, when we became awareness of the global effects, Agenda 21 was approved. It required facing global problems by acting locally. Myself and Francesco shared the same experience of vice president of the Agenda 21 on the local level. So the idea was to include also local authorities in this path. So it's an important step in Italy. But the phenomenon of urbanization coupled with the increase in population were two major phenomena last century, but also in this century. So today, the role of cities is clearly recognized, because cities are where more vulnerabilities, more inequalities are concentrated, but also more vulnerabilities are concentrated because of infrastructures, because of the concentration of people. But these are also the places where you can design, reactions or responses. The most critical areas for the climate and for pollution and other global problems are actually buildings and places where you live. Today, we are trying to intervene in terms of energy efficiency, new materials. A lot of new things are emerging, but it's not easy to transform and innovate within the required timing. In the construction industry, there is a lot that can be done. Also, sustainable mobility is a big topic. Cities are actually succeeding in implementing sustainable mobility. You can walk, use bicycles, and public transportation. Micromobility and sharing is also becoming more and more popular, of course, with all the sanification and disinfection system due to COVID. COVID actually is pushing us towards changing previous attitudes. And the other large area is the food area. We know that a healthy diet with the right amount of calories using maybe less bovine meat and more fruit and vegetable is a type of diet that has a smaller impact on the planet. So these three areas are areas where you can intervene. But in general, on a city level, Agenda 2030 identified goal number 11, which is specifically devoted to all urban contexts, indicating solutions in 3 areas that I mentioned, but also others. For instance, greenery. The presence of green areas in cities requires infrastructures. In addition to typical infrastructures, we need green infrastructures. And then the urban agenda should be passed on to all local administrations, to all cities. So the urban agenda must be implemented depending on the specific needs of every city, but it also requires a common approach. Finally, you mentioned air pollution as a topic. And here, it's true that with COVID, probably the only benefit of COVID is that it actually worsened all the areas of the Agenda 2030. But the only benefit is cleaner air. It's a temporary effect. Again, there is now a rebound effect. So greenhouse gas emissions and global pollution are now back on the increase. In order to get improvements, you need to implement infrastructural changes, which must be implemented, and the technologies are there, but you need the right policies. The figures mentioned before are quite worrying for Italy in terms of air pollution, actually. On the global level, if you look at indoor and outdoor pollution, we have 6 million victims every year, concentrated in China and Asia. So there is a global responsibility, technological innovation and transformation of production and transformation of consumption must be implemented everywhere in Europe and also in developing countries. Thank you very much. You referred to lifestyles and conscious choices, which are very dear to the Buddhist community, of course, and thank you for doing that. Food choices in terms of what we eat, but also in terms of what we are not wasting. Food waste overall is estimated to account for 10% of global emissions. So if you were a country, food waste would be the 3rd largest polluters worldwide, on the same level as the European Union. Of course, you can interpret the data in a different manner, but the message is clear. When our way of consuming has an impact that goes well beyond the daily expense, it has an impact on climate, of course. And then we're talking about excessive consumption. And now I'm getting into the topic of how we can respond and reply to the various interconnected crises. The environmental crisis is strongly connected to social crisis and to social inclusion. So I'm asking Francesco Bicciato now, is there a problem of hyper-consumerism? What is the model that we should follow? Yes, there is a problem of hyper-consumerism. The problem is mainly that we have to radically change the model of development in terms of consumption, finance, and use of economic resources. So I'd like to share news. There is a small, larger revolution going on in the world of economics and finance. And I think it's important to underline this because it's not very much well known. Why is this happening? There are several cultural and opinion movements that are quite important. For instance, Fridays for Future, young people who fought laws for the environment, but also there are major statements by the Dalai Lama and Pope Francis. The Dalai Lama says that to day the Buddha would be an environmentalist. This is very reassuring, I would say. I mean, interdependence and dialogue, both among religions, but also the dialogue between companies and investors and civil society, that is also a potential solution to the problem. But what is happening? What is happening is that awareness is increasing a lot, but also responsibility is increasing on the part of large investors, because they have realized that it's much more important to invest on the environment and on welfare and social development, much more than continue to consume resources with major negative externalities, as economists would say. So it means that they damage the environment badly. In 2015, large insurance companies worldwide had a parallel meeting in parallel to COP21, and they basically came to a small, big conclusion. Namely, it was much more convenient to invest in reforesting the planet than to continue to pay for claims due to climate change, which were cyclical. The environmental catastrophes have become cyclical, which worsened the economic situation of these companies. I mean, it's not like insurers woke up one morning and they became environmentalists overnight. They have realized that investing in welfare and on the environment was also economically and financially convenient. That's the big, small, big revolution. Green companies, photovoltaics, for instance, were much more resilient than other companies during the pandemics. Companies that included green innovation in their plans and projects managed the situation much better. Investment funds during COVID had yields that were bigger than the yield of unsustainable investment funds. So let's use this definition. So that's the topic. We're faced with a big revolution because, of course, the new model of development is determined by a radical shift of capital from investments that damage the environment badly, carbon-based, to environmental friendly investment with low carbon or free carbon investment. So just to give you a few figures, from 8 billion in 2015 of ethical funds, we've reached 80 billion in 2020. It means that the propension to investing and consuming has radically changed. And this is a key element, because it could say, you could indicate, okay, there is next generation EU, 750 billion is coming from Europe, 200 plus will come to Italy. So let's use all this money in a sustainable manner, because this doesn't mean to become poorer. It means the opposite. We become richer, economically speaking, but also, and especially from the viewpoint of mitigating social inequalities that I discussed before. So basically, this is what I wanted to share with you. Investors are many. There are many investors, including those who didn't even think of doing finance in a different manner. Now they have radically changed their attitude, not completely though, but the process is going on. And I'm very confident that finally we have realized that we cannot go back, and that the model of development that we had before is no longer working. Thank you very much. Yes, we have all realized that we cannot sustain that model anymore. The past model is unsustainable, and that's a model that took us to this point. However, and I want to be a bit provocative, the question is also for Professor Croci. There is a big discussion on sustainability. Of course, the European Union is giving us guidelines. 37% of the investments that we make must be in green areas. It must be sustainable investments. But I'm wondering, there is also sort of greenwashing phenomenon that we should, be aware of and be careful about. Well, first of all, I agree with Francesco. We are faced with an extraordinary opportunity, maybe unique opportunity because of COVID, which is obliging us to embrace a transformation. So there is a big opportunity to transform our economies. COVID brought Italy, but also brought the whole world to rethinking the way to support families and companies. This approach cannot be sustained in the medium term because it would result in a large, unsustainable increase in public debt. In Europe, as the people have acted in a very clear manner with the Next Generation EU package, but also in other countries worldwide, they are going towards a stimulus packages to transform our economies, where green and digital are the two main directions. So indeed, it's a great, unique opportunity that we cannot not miss out. So Agenda 2030, internationally, the Paris Agreement, another shared goal. The COVID crisis that should be overcome with the stimulus packages. So now it's up to us, which also includes the phenomenon of greenwashing. When you have an opportunity, everybody goes for it. Some of them are true and they really seize the opportunity. Francesco mentioned the financial industry, which is changing. Now, if you look at some international performance indicators, today we can say that the financial instruments are linked to circular economy and renewable energies already perform better than traditional investments. There's a phenomenon of carbon divestment, where large institutional and non-institutional investors are divesting from fossil fuels into green fuels. So there are subjects who really believe in this movement, and there are big and good signals overall. But of course, there are those who do greenwashing. They just follow, jump on the wagon. And their actions are not based on a real added value or actions with a major social impact. I think that the problem can only be solved with common indicators, common metrics, and common monitoring systems. The process is still underway. Environmental and social governance is the European process, and it's going on. Somehow it's taking us towards the standardization of methodologies so that you can also do some benchmarks and give evaluations that are objectively based. It's a path where Europe especially, but not only Europe, has been doing a lot. It's very committed. There is an involvement of institutions and companies, and I think that's the way to go. Having a common language and common metrics then allow you to understand who is really making an impact and who is doing greenwashing. Yes, ecological transition is not just energy transition, because a lot of attention is devoted to energy because it's an important element. But you started by talking about biodiversity and relationship with the territory. So it's a sort of integrated ecology, the one that we should care about. We have just a few minutes left for this beautiful conversation. So the question is, what can we as citizens do? So recipes for us individuals, and as individuals being part of a community. We talked about sustainable funds before. What else can we do, Francesco? Well, first of all,
abbiamo un potere molto, molto forte. Il potere
We have a lot of power. The power to orientate the consumer market and savings market through our decision. We have to claim that once we make an investment, the funds we invest in are ESG funds, as Eduardo said before. This means that the entire process of investment, the whole supply chain of investment must be sustainability certified. Unfortunately, at the moment, we don't have a certification, but there is transparency, which is in the hands of investors. We cannot be passive subjects vis-a-vis our investment choices. The same is true for our consumption choices. We cannot ignore that our products have a lower environmental impact as compared to others. In food, this is very clear. The development of green agriculture is impressive. We are #1 in Europe, and not a lot is being said about that. We are first because we started early, and there we have certifications that somehow protect us. They protect us, but we need political action. Political doesn't mean ideology. I'm not talking about political ideological choices. What I mean is that our choices determine the market of goods and the market of capitals. I really appreciate the spirit also of the VESAK, as Filippo said before, pragmatism, which is behind deeply philosophical and deeply religious choices. The pragmatism that must be consistent with the message of interdependence, sustainability, and so on and so forth, which underlies a different model of development. So among the many things that we can do, this is what we can do. Use the car less, use the bike more. Differentiate and sort our waste. There is a long list of what we can do. But what I mean is that we really have a big power in our hands. Thank you very much for talking about awareness of the community. Professor Croce, a couple of minutes to close this conversation. As I was saying before, our lifestyles and consumption models are really important. In the way we live, the way we travel, the way we eat, and all of our activities are really important. In some sectors, there are, in fact, standards and certifications and labels, energy labels, for instance. Everybody now checks consumption before buying a washing machine or a refrigerator. So we are going towards more complex choices in terms of energy consumption. Reducing CO2 or using less water is always taken into consideration. So there is a process where our choices could be more informed and more aware. And this is key, of course. There's another aspect linked to the lobbying ability of citizens and the intermediate bodies, associations. Although today in China there is much more awareness about the environment and they're developing 5-year plans. They set out very ambitious targets, and some of them are actually achieved. And if they are achieved quickly, it's because there is a lot of public pressure, because they understood the externalities vis-a-vis an harmonious relationship with the environment is fundamental. So the governors have to consider the public opinion as fundamental because it is key. Also, interreligious dialogue is an element that has placed the relationship between mankind and nature at the center. Has always been part of religions worldwide, but now it's a key element of not only individual awareness, but also social and political lobbying. So I think that we do have all the necessary conditions to determine a change with correct information and awareness at the basis.
Thank you so much. I'm going to close with a joke. As Francesca said, if Buddha was today with us, he would call himself an environmentalist. This is what the Dalai Lama said. Of course, the Buddha could not have known the effects of climate change, but certainly he traced a path, a method for answering responding to situations that are undergoing. So thank you so much. You've been precious. Thank you for sharing with us your thoughts. We will have hopefully a chance to meet soon, hopefully live and work together again. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. So there is now a precious teacher, Anitubten Chodron, founderess of the Sravasti Abbey. And as she couldn't be with us live today because she is in retreat at the moment in her Abbey, she wanted to share with us her contribution on the responsibility of each one of us and each one of us within a community for the care of the planet. So this is her video.
I'm not going to give you all the statistics that lead you to get very frightened about what's going to happen with the idea that that will motivate you to act, because I'm sure you've heard that many, many times before. I have. Because in some way, it seems to me completely obvious why we should take care of the earth and the environment. And I wonder why I even have to talk about it. It's like if you live in a house and the house is filthy and it's moldy and it's filled with junk and crud, are you going to be healthy? All of us know, of course not. Do you clean your house because you want to stay well and you don't want to, have to breathe in all sorts of pollutants and trip over garbage when you're walking from one room to the other? Yeah, you clean your house. It's kind of obvious, isn't it? So if we apply this to the whole world, because we don't just live in our house, we live in the whole world, then it seems that we human beings should just automatically take care of our environment because it's the place we live in. And that's not even considering, that we share the planet with millions and zillions of other living beings in the sky, under the sea, in the anthills, so many other living beings, such that we're actually the minority population on the earth. But we're the major polluter, aren't we human beings? So it would seem natural, if you're the minority population, but you ruin the planet the most, that you should pitch in and try and stop doing that and reverse it. Okay? So these things just somehow seem obvious to me. But we human beings aren't doing that. Yeah? And why? Why? I think one thing is that we just look at how things are right now and we say, well, the house isn't too dirty. I'll clean it later. You all know that, don't you? On Saturday, after working the whole week, you're tired. On Saturday morning, you're supposed to clean. I'll do it later. So we look at how we clean the environment and care for the environment in the same way. I'll do it later. Yeah, it's not so bad. Other generations, all the young people, they're so bright and talented and enthusiastic about the environment. We'll leave it for them to fix it. Okay, that's our ignorance. Yeah, that doesn't realize what things are happening right now. And then also there's our self-centeredness. Why should I do it? Yes, we should. All of us should take care of the environment and limit emissions and not, waste so much. But everybody's doing it. Why should I sacrifice my happiness and pleasure when everybody's doing it? Yeah. And we all need fossil fuels. We're thirsty for them. Our economy depends on fossil fuels. If we don't have them, what's going to happen to the economy? Then we're all going to really suffer. So we better not change anything. Okay. So we have, quite a self-centered attitude about this, that, if it's inconvenient for me, and if it means that I'm going to be not even suffering from it, but inconvenienced by it, then why should I do it? We human beings do this in many, many areas of our life, our personal lives, as well as how our country relates to things, as well as a global community, how we relate to things. So there's something in our attitude that we really need to look at and fix. Because the reality is that we all share the planet, and pollution doesn't stop at the borders. Okay, pollution, it's in the sky, it goes everywhere, whether our country creates it or not, whether we create it or not. Yeah. And so if we expect other people to regulate themselves because their pollution could adversely affect us, then it only makes sense that we regulate ourselves so our pollution doesn't affect them. So I'm really glad that in Biden's new infrastructure bill, he's really investing a lot in new power technology with wind, solar, whatever. So that's really good. Yeah. But our companies need to change, and we have this mentality that we always have to grow. Yeah, I find that interesting. The economy, if it just stays as it is now, that's considered bad. It has to continually increase. Yeah. But how can you continually increase when, there's only so much land, so we can only have so much population, and there's only so many resources, and they run out. So somehow how we think of the economy and the importance of growth, we have to change that more to really see how interdependent we are, and to care about ourselves and our own family, but not only that, care about all the living beings, because I can't even say we're all in this boat together. We're all on this planet together. So we've really got to cooperate and change our ways, and not predicate it on, I'll cut back on emissions if you do, and you do it first, then I'll do it. Okay, no, we can't think like that. We have to think, this is something that's important. I commit to do it because it's the right thing to do and it's important. And I care about all the other living beings on the planet. And then if we show that, and there's a sense of compassion for others behind it, there's a sense of our own ethical integrity that is motivating us to do this, then others will follow suit. If they don't follow suit, at least we're helping. Yeah. So we shouldn't predicate our help on other people's help and they're doing it first. We have to do it first because we see that it's necessary and important and valuable. Okay. And so this can become, in Buddhist terms, it can become a process of learning renunciation. Yeah, one of the first three principal aspects of the path. That we are, and renunciation doesn't mean you give up pleasure. It means you give up suffering. You renounce suffering, so you renounce the causes of suffering. Okay, so we're willing to give a few things up in order to have a cleaner world and help ourselves and help others. It becomes a practice of compassion and bodhicitta, the second of the three principal aspects of the path, because we do it for all sentient beings, because we all are in this together. Yeah. And we have responsibility for future generations, not only of human beings, but of the future generations of all the different species. And it becomes a practice of wisdom, the third principal aspects of the path, because we want to abandon polluting the world. We want to practice with wisdom to create other sources of energy, to be a considerate neighbor. Okay, so we're wise about what to practice and abandon. And, we see the wisdom in this situation. Going back to the second one about it being a practice of compassion and bodhicitta, I was just reading that the last man of the Yuma tribe in the Amazon died. So now that whole tribe is extinct. He had two daughters who have married with people in a neighboring tribe. Yeah, and they're still remembering their Yuma heritage. Yuma is spelled J-U-M-A. Yeah, they're still remembering it. Yeah, but the Brazilian government, is very much taking away the lands of the indigenous people and not protecting them from COVID. So many of the indigenous people in the Amazon are suffering and are dying from COVID. And the reason for this is because the industry in the country wants to go and plant crops there and mine the land for minerals, get the trees, and so on and so forth. And so this is a direct example of the effect of our impervious attitude towards climate change and towards protecting the environment, that right here and now, different indigenous tribes are going extinct. Yeah. So we may say, well, that again, are self-centered. That's them. Yeah. Us, we're too numerous. We're not going to go extinct. Well, the indigenous tribes, 2 centuries ago or 1 century ago, were very plentiful and thousands of people, and things can die out very quickly. So let's take care of each other and all the living beings by taking care of the place where we live. And let's take it as our own responsibility to do that.
Insegnamenti davvero preziosi, ringraziamo.
Wonderful and precious teachings. Let's thank Anitutta and Chodron. We're going to go back live to Sravasti Abbey later. So allow me now to change my language and introduce our new guest.
I'm really honored to introduce
It's such an honor to introduce Professor David Loy. Hi, David. It's great to see you. It's nice being with you. Just a few words of introduction.
He is, amongst the many things, a professor, a writer, a Zen teacher in the Sambo Zen tradition, co-founder of New Rocky Mountains Eco-Dharma Retreat Center near Boulder, Colorado. How lucky. And a prolific author. His last book is this one, and is perhaps one of my favorites ever. The book is called Eco-Dharma, Buddhist Teachings for the Ecological Crisis. And it is going to be translated into Italian, David, by our own publishing house, which is called Ubi Liber. And actually has just joined the social media, so people can follow Ubi Liber as well. And we translate books from mostly all traditions. And so everyone will have a chance to read this very precious book. So it is with gratitude that I leave the virtual floor to David. David, thank you again so much for being with us. Thank you. David, sorry, you are muted. You have to unmute. Sorry about that.
Problem.
Yeah.
Any better? Can you hear me now?
Absolutely. Yes, we can.
Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Great. I just was thanking you for that very kind introduction and for this invitation, but most of all for this, the fact that you are focusing this year, VESAK Day, on the ecological challenge, which I think is so important. You know, Buddhism has always been about waking up. In fact, the word Buddha means the awakened one. But today we find that it is really important for us to wake up in another sense. In a further sense, we need to wake up to the particular situation, the particular historical situation that we find ourselves in. Some people, such as Noam Chomsky, are saying that this is the most dangerous time ever in human history. And it really seems like what we do in the next decade or so could have extraordinary consequences for hundreds or thousands of years to come. The fact that our situation is so dangerous has very little to do with the COVID pandemic. Of course, that's horrible, but there have been many worse pandemics in the past. The problem is structural. We have many dimensions to it, economic, political, and so forth. But today, of course, the issue is the ecological crisis. And please note that I don't talk about climate. I don't single that out because urgent though it is, the climate emergency is just the tip of the iceberg. It's just a small part of a much greater challenge that includes so many other things. The 6th great extinction event, that so many plant and animal species are going extinct so quickly, 100 to 1,000 times faster than would be normal. We have degradation of topsoil, cutting down of forests. We have plastics, including microplastics. We have so many toxins in the air, in the sea, in the earth, in our bodies, and so forth. We can go on and on about that. The question is, for today, what does Buddhism have to offer that can help us understand and respond appropriately to this enormous challenge? I'm reminded of a couple Zen stories. In one of them, a Zen master is asked, what should we do when difficult times come? And his reply, it's kind of hard to do on Zoom, his reply is to open his arms and say, welcome, welcome, let's welcome these difficult times. The point being that our path is not avoiding, it's not about avoiding difficult times. In fact, sometimes those are the most transformative. And there's another Zen story where the great Chinese master Unman was asked by a student, what is the fruit of a lifetime of practice. We practice, we follow the way. What's the result? What's the long-term consequence? And he replied very simply, responding appropriately. Responding appropriately. Following this path, we learn how to respond appropriately to whatever situation arises. And that's really important to remind us. Buddhism is not about escaping or transcending this world, but rather responding appropriately to the situation. And if the situation is so urgent as it is today, we really need to ask, what does Buddhism, what do Buddhist teachings and practices have to offer that can help us understand and respond appropriately to perhaps the greatest challenge that humanity has ever faced? One answer is maybe not, maybe nothing at all. I mean, the Buddha lived, 2,400 years ago in a very different time and place, Iron Age India. Our problems were not his. And this is the same true. It's also true for all of the other Asian Buddhist traditions, all of which are pre-modern. So we can't simply go back and read the Pali Canon or the Mahayana Sutras and pick out answers to what we should do. But nonetheless, within the traditional Buddhist teachings, there's a great deal that is relevant to our situation today. And what I would like to talk about in my speech today, my talk today, is what I think is in fact the single most important thing that Buddhism has to offer, that Buddhism can contribute to the situation that we find ourselves in today. And it's very simply the Bodhisattva Path, or maybe we should say the new Bodhisattva Path, because I think we need to understand it in a slightly different way. And sometimes now people are talking about the Eco-Sattva Path, focusing on the ecological dimensions of the path. There are three aspects to that path that I want to basically single out and focus on in the time allotted to me. The first, of course, is the most basic one, that bodhisattvas have a double path, or a double practice, that is. In other words, bodhisattvas, and we should all be bodhisattvas these days, bodhisattvas continue to work on their own transformation, right? Their own spiritual practices, whatever they may be, often meditation, chanting, visualizations, whatever it is that helps to transform them. But at the same time, they know that that's not sufficient, that they also need to be engaged in the world, to be actively doing what they can in order to heal the world. And it's really important here. I think the important point about this is that it's not simply the case that these two practices sort of go together nicely. It's more profound than that. It's that these two practices need each other if they are to be as successful as we need them to be. I mean, I think we can see it in the case of activists, ecological activists, how difficult a path that is, how easy it is to become frustrated, angry, to burn out, unless you are also grounded in some kind of contemplative practice that can help you sort of heal and restore. It's that. So for people who are engaged in those kinds of activism, I think helping them find some kind of practice is extremely important. But it also works the other way around, in the sense that, well, let me say it like this. When we begin our own Buddhist practice, why do we do it? Well, usually because there's some sense of dissatisfaction in our lives, right? Dukkha is the traditional term. Some dissatisfaction, right? I mean, why would we spend so much time and energy and money meditating, facing the wall, sore back, sore legs, whatever? Because there's some problem in our lives that the practice can help with. And so inevitably, at the beginning of our practice, there's a certain amount of self-concern or self-preoccupation. We're trying to resolve or reduce our own dukkha. And yet, as we mature in the practice, as we get more deep into it, as our practice begins to flourish, we realize that at the core of our dukkha, of our suffering and dissatisfaction, is the delusion of a separate self, is the delusion of a me that's separate from you and the rest of the world. The delusion that my well-being, therefore, is inherently separate from your well-being. And as we realize this, then we realize how important engagement in the world is, that it's not simply a matter of, something we might do in our free time, but it's actually an essential part of our own personal transformation. Let me call up my notes here. If we continue to focus on simply our own practice, our own serenity, our own enlightenment, actually, in the long run, what that can do is reinforce the fundamental problem, this delusion that my well-being is separate from yours, right? So in that sense, it becomes essential for our own well-being. You can say that the one who benefits most from the activity of a bodhisattva is the bodhisattva herself or himself, right? Franz Kafka, the Czech writer, he wrote in a letter, quote, "You can hold yourself back from the sufferings of the world. That's something you can do. But perhaps your very holding back is the one suffering you could avoid." I think that captures it really well. You can hold back. We can cling to serenity, emptiness, whatever in our practice and turn away from the world. But that clinging, that reinforcement of separation, that is the one suffering we might indeed avoid. I think many of us have a kind of myth. We think about somebody like Milarepa in his cave. We think about withdrawing from the world and simply focusing on our own practice. Milarepa was said to go all the way to Buddhahood in one lifetime. And yet, as Joanna Macy put it, I think there's a danger here. She said that the world has a role to play in our awakening. It's not simply a matter of cutting ourselves off. We need to learn. We sharpen. Thinking back in my own days when I started Zen practice, intense meditation, it wasn't that difficult to have insights and openings. The greater challenge was integrating those into how I actually lived in the world. And in order to do that, we have to be out there. We have to work. Just because we have insights, it doesn't mean that our deep-rooted, self-preoccupied, self-centered habits automatically disappear. It's by engaging in the world where actually that's an essential part of our transformation. As Kukai or Kobo Daishi, one of the great Japanese founders, put it, the measure of our enlightenment is how we serve others, right? The test of our enlightenment is how we serve others. So that's the first point, the importance of the double practice and the fact that those two practices are concerned for personal transformation and social transformation, how they actually work together. The second point is why I sometimes say we need a new Bodhisattva path, because I think something has changed. I think, frankly, in the modern world, we have a more expanded and better understanding of dukkha, right? I mean, when you look at the Buddhist tradition, the way dukkha, suffering, has been understood, it's been very much on a personal level. Simply on a personal level, that if there's some problem in my life, it's due simply to me and maybe my own karma earlier in this life or in past lifetimes. Actually, I think the Buddha had a deeper appreciation that somehow the tradition has lost. What I mean by this is that if you go back to the Pali Canon and look at what the Buddha did, he created a bhikkhuni sangha for women. pretty radical in his time, given the very oppressed situation for women. But he realized women have the same nature as men. They have the same ability to wake up, that is. And when you join the Buddhist Sangha, what happened? You lost caste. That's pretty radical too. It suggests to me that the Buddha had an understanding of the social dimension of dukkha. In modern terms, it's not simply that the three poisons that Buddhism identifies, greed, ill will, and delusion, it's not simply that they operate on an individual level. I think that's something that we can see now. We can see how they have become collective and even institutionalized. For example, if greed means you never have enough, I think that's a pretty good description of our economic system. It seems to me the real religion of the modern world is consumerism, and that is promoted by an economic system that has to keep growing if it's not going to collapse. I think we have institutionalized ill will, certainly here in the United States, obviously in the case of militarism, in terms of how much resources we devote to our military. And likewise, delusion. Delusion with the modern media, think about how skillful they are in encouraging, in purveying what's often called fake news. In the United States, almost all of the media are private. They're corporations. That is to say, the news media aren't fundamentally interested in informing or educating us. They're about finding ways to grab our eyeballs and sell them to the highest bidder, to the advertisers, in that way promoting consumerism, right? So we need to understand these social, these institutional forms of the three poisons as well, that they don't just operate on an individual level, they also operate collectively, right? What I notice in the United States is in the last generation or so, we've become a lot better Buddhists in, say, engagement on an individual level, maybe helping homeless people, prison dharma, going into prisons, also hospice work, helping people who are dying. But we're not very good on addressing this kind of institutional level. What I mean by that is, you could say, we have become better at pulling drowning people out of the river, but we're not much better asking, well, why are there so many more people drowning in the river? Who or what is pushing them in upstream, right? These are institutional problems that are difficult to address, but I think we have to find ways to do it. And that also encourages us to create stronger sanghas. Again, something I notice here in the US, when we think about the three treasures, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, well, we have many teachers in the US. We have lots of teachings. Where I think we still have problems is if in community, in working together. Bill McKibben, when he was in Paris for the climate talks a few years ago, someone asked him, what can I do as an individual? And he said, stop being an individual. If we're going to, this is me now, not Bill McKibben, if we're going to address these structural problems that continue to cause ecological destruction, we're going to have to find better ways to work together as sanghas and not simply see that not believe that our practice is only something that happens on an individual level. I'm rushing a bit here, but I don't want to overstep my time. So those are the first 2 points. The first 2 points, the combination of personal practice and social practice. And secondly, this deeper understanding of dukkha and how it is that we need to find ways to work together to address institutional causes of dukkha. And the third one, though, is that the Bodhisattva Path, it does not really tell us what to do, but it has a great deal to say about how we do it, whatever it is that we decide to do. And again, this follows naturally from, if you think about the fact that Buddhism started and developed long before the kind of problems we face today. But nonetheless, the Bodhisattva Path has a great deal to offer, which in fact I don't have time to get into very much, except I want to focus on one aspect in particular, and it's simply this. Bodhisattvas act without attachment to the results or to the consequences of their actions. Let me say that again because it's so important. Bodhisattvas act without attachment to the results, right? In fact, the Buddha in the Pali Canon said that the actions of an awakened person are nirasa, which can be translated without expectation or even without hope. And we find this also in many other places in the Buddhist tradition. And of course, it makes sense insofar as Buddhist practice encourages us to focus on what's happening right here and now, rather than to, get caught up in what may or may not happen in the future. Let me spend the last few minutes here just trying to unpack that in a couple different ways, because it's easy to misunderstand, I think. Buddhism emphasizes motivation and intention so much that we might think, well, whether or not what I do has any effects, that doesn't matter. What's important is how pure is my motivation. And I think that's a very, very dangerous misunderstanding of what non-attachment to result means. So let me just say a few things about it. Number one, consider for a moment the difference between running a 100-yard dash and a marathon, which is 26 miles something. I mean, when you're running a 100-meter dash, the only thing that matters is getting to the other end as quickly as possible, right? You don't have time to think about anything else. But you can't run a marathon that way, obviously, right? You've got to pace yourself. And in fact, pace yourself in the sense that you are running in the right direction, but you're not focused so much on the goal. Rather, your focus is right here and now. Just this step, just this step. In Japan, and in fact, in kind of classical Buddhism too, Japan, they talk about tada, just this step. And in Buddhism too, tathata, just thisness. But again, the important thing is, it's not that you're sitting on the side of the road. You are going in a certain direction. But nonetheless, the focus is right here and now. You don't want to lose that. So that's one dimension of acting without attachment to results. The focus is on the action. But consider also a race or a path that doesn't have any end at all, that goes on indefinitely, right? What about that? I'm thinking here about the 4 Bodhisattva vows that in the Zen tradition we recite at least once a day in Zen centers, right? And the first of those vows says very simply, living beings are numberless. I vow to save them all. Now, saving can be understood in many different ways, but in any case, notice that if we take this vow seriously, we are vowing to do something that cannot possibly be accomplished. How crazy is that? And yet that's the whole point of it. The fact that it cannot be accomplished, the fact that it's not about reaching a certain final conclusion. It's about a transformation in the orientation of the meaning of one's life. So instead of our usual asking, what's in this situation for me, we turn around and we say, what can I do to make this world a better place for all of us, with the realization that my well-being is not separate from the well-being of the world, that I'm not separate from that, right? And there's no end to this. This is the important thing, right? There's no attachment to result because there's no final result, right? No matter what happens, we're not discouraged or not for long. We dust ourselves off. Maybe we return to our meditation, but we keep at it, right? because this vow goes beyond attachment to any particular accomplishment. If we're successful, fine. There's always more to do. If we're not successful, we keep trying, maybe in a different way. But this non-attachment to results is because this new meaning to one's life opens up our focus in a completely different way. But there's a third and final point that I want to emphasize here. When we look at the ecological crisis, if we're quite frank, it looks very difficult. Let's be honest, it looks very difficult indeed. And scientists don't always like to talk about it in public, but it may well be that we have passed or are on the edge of passing tipping points where it will be very difficult to stop what's a kind of breakaway, self-reinforcing heating and so much. The truth is, we just don't know. We just don't know. And what's really interesting about just not knowing is that that is an essential teaching in Buddhism. Certainly in the Zen tradition that I practiced, just not knowing, or as we say, not knowing mind, is essential. In the Zen peacemakers, it's the first of the three tenets of the Zen peacemakers, right? The other two are bearing witness to the joys and sorrows of the world. The third is taking actions that follow from that bearing witness. This not knowing is so essential because it involves a kind of increased openness. We become more spacious, more aware of our own reactivity, and more open to the perspectives of other people. So not knowing is not a fixed position, it's just the opposite. It's a way of engaging with the world right here and now, just as it is. We don't know necessarily what's going to happen next, but we do the best we can according to what we understand, and we are ready to change what we do as the situation changes, or maybe as our understanding of the situation changes. One of my Zen teachers, Robert Aiken, used to say that our task isn't to clear up the mystery. Our task is to make the mystery clear. On this path, it's not as though awakening means, oh, now I understand everything. No, it's actually we open up to a sacred, mysterious world where we don't necessarily know what's going on. We do the best we can in response to the best we know without knowing for sure, right? Please notice, this is not about hope or optimism. Optimism, pessimism, hope, despair, those are both dualistic. Those are both attachment to what may or may not happen in the future, whereas bodhisattvas are motivated by something deeper, by a kind of compassionate generosity of spirit that wants to give without necessarily being attached to the results, without knowing what those results may be. What this points to, I think, is very simple. Our task today is to do the very best we can, not knowing if anything we do is going to make any difference whatsoever. I think that's the essence of the Bodhisattva's non-attachment to results, right? Have we already passed ecological tipping points and civilization as we know is doomed? We don't know, but that not knowing is okay. Of course, there's always concern. We'd like it if we're able to make a difference, but ultimately, that's not something we have completely control over, right? We could say that our actions are our gift to the earth as well as to each other. And like every real gift, you don't give a gift with some expectation of return, then it's not a gift. A real gift is given freely without that expectation. And that's what we are called upon to do today, to act in that fashion, to do the very best we can. We don't know if what we do will make any difference whatsoever, but it is very important for us to do it nonetheless. Of course, to be so attached to the results of our efforts is something very difficult. It's to set the bar very high. right? I mean, maybe none of us is able to do this perfectly, but that's not the point. Our job is to not be perfect, but to do the best we can. And again, because we have our meditation practice, when we can see that we're attached, we have a way of dealing with that. We have a way of going back to our fundamental equanimity of our true nature. And by being able to do that, we are able to do the very best we can. It really seems to me, to conclude, that if we Buddhists today don't want to do this or can't do this, then Buddhism isn't what the world needs right now. But what I've tried to point out is, in fact, that if we understand the Buddhist teachings, especially this Bodhisattva teaching, I think it might be, in fact, just the single most important thing that Buddhism has to offer right now. I'll leave it at that. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, David. Thank you for your wisdom coming from every single word, and for the inspiration. That was really precious. Thank you. Thank you so much. Responding appropriately, how important engagement is, and how the practice can help us handling sometimes the emotions in our activism and so many other things. But thank you, because we are now moving into a different section, sure, but not different actually, because we are talking about what we do in concrete terms. So again, thank you so much.
Thank you, Stuart. Thank you, everyone.
I'm looking forward to meeting you soon. Ciao, grazie. Grazie. E dunque rendere concreto il valore buddista
della cura, making it tangible, I mean, the value of care and compassion is something that we can do tangibly. That's trick that we dealt with. But David, UBI, as you know, is committed to projects dealing with care for the earth and social inclusion. And also, we are engaged in collecting resources. The 8 per 1,000 is devoted to our purposes. So thank you for your contributions. Now we get into the world of doing through a short video, which is traveled in the world of interdependence and community change and biodiversity. It's a story of social inclusion, and it's the story of one bee as a friend, a bee for a friend.
Poco fuori Roma, in una vasta area verde, si trova la collina.
Not far from Rome, we have La Collina Sorta. It's a reference point, a center for the integration of children with autistic disorders, with disconnections, and find balance in nature. The natural spaces on the hills are open and accessible to everyone. They host animals, games, teaching paths, and workshops for children and young adults. They share a common path of growth, and everyone gives her own contribution. Among the initiatives, there is a multi-experience workshop with bees. It's an experimental project where children in the open discover this organism, which is fundamental for the planet, learning from the school of nature. The project, through interactions and the observation of bees, talks about 4 main aspects: interdependence, sense of community, change, and diversity. Bees guarantee our ecosystems and the balances governing the mechanism of nature, which are interdependent with humans. If they didn't exist, there were terrible consequences on biodiversity and our food. Every beehive is a community that moves synergically on all levels within the ecosystem. During their short lives, all bees, except for the queen bees, move from one role to another, and they become experts in all tasks for the beehive. Everyone is instrumental to the survival of this wonderful organism. A beehive is a city of women. All the bees are sisters, and they can take care of each other. This project is unique and far-reaching, and is the result of a non-governmental organization supported by UBI, thanks to the funds gathered with 8,000, an appeal to our sense of community and belonging to nature, to which we are linked through an interdependent relationship, but we are also an integral part of it.
Eccoci. Dunque, l'Ecodharma e la compassione in
So, Ecodharma and compassion in action. We're going to discuss this topic with some friends of the Buddhist Union, and we will do so by discussing the wonderful world of bees. We will talk about seas, fish, seeds, and culture and nature, together with our guests. Here we have Alessandro. I see you now. Welcome, and thank you for being with us. He's a beekeeper, 500,000 bees to take care of. At least 500,000. That's wonderful. You're also the coordinator of Miriam Onlus, the project that we just saw in the video, right?
Allora, sì, qual è la migliore introduzione di questo bellissimo video per parlare?
The best introduction to this topic was given by the video. It's a wonderful way to start talking about the project. I'm the coordinator of Un'Ape per Amiga, a Bee as a Friend, which is an organization that wonderfully conveys important concepts. You hear about this topic, there's new awareness of the world and the problems of bees. You hear about pesticides and the importance of bees in our ecosystem and in our own life, or the life we belong to. What best moment, or what would be best than doing a direct interaction, having a direct experience? This project involves everyone, new beekeepers, and the kids on the hill, children suffering from autistic disorders. Everyone cooperates with their own skills to protect bees, to protect this insect, which is the best known and the most endangered, but not the only one, which
servizio di impollinazione.
Gives this wonderful pollination service, and it provides the services of pollination to our life. Pollination is fundamental in order for us to have fruit and vegetables and other things necessary for our life. But who can take care of the bees if not us? And this beautiful project that has been developed by Miriam Onlus, and thanks to the fundamental contribution of UBI, that's exactly what we are doing. We have new material beekeepers joining us that will take bees to the territory, managing them in their houses, in their spaces, diffusing or helping these insects that for many years have seen a reduction in the areas devoted to them, arable lands devoted to growing forage or for growing cattle for the meat industry, is something that we have to come to terms with. Bees are in bad situation because they have no sources of sustenance. Intensive agriculture was one of the reasons that caused a crisis of these insects, also due to the use of pesticides. How do we respond with direct actions or with political engagement? But other speakers have already discussed this topic much better than what I could do. But what we can also do is bring back bees to the territories and bring them back to our consciousness. Who's going to take care of them? the users of our services at Be as a Friend, disabled children, for instance, coming to our centers can do this and become witnesses. Otherwise, if this concept is so far, then there is a bee crisis, something needs to be done, but then we don't do something. What would mean interdependence? I mean, if we continue to delegate, I mean, this is what a Be as a Friend does. The idea is to sustain and support interdependence. These are wonderful, but also the other forms of life on the planet are wonderful. We choose a bee as a friend, but we have all the other animals who are friends. We choose bees to convey this concept. Thank you very much, Alessandro. I'm really looking forward to coming to you, see you and your bees and the wonderful children and young adults that you take care of. Thank you for this wonderful opportunity. We are always open, so anyone who would like to come is certainly welcome. Hopefully, I'll meet you in person as soon as possible. Thank you, and thank you, Alessandro. So we move on from bees to fish with Andrea Morello. Hello, Andrea, I see you. He's president of Sea Shepherd Italy. So you devote your life to defending life, basically. The life of fish, the life of sea, in a framework of interdependence and guarantees for the future generations, guarantee of life, I would say. As the Captain Paul Watson says, you know, if the oceans die, we will also die. So tell us about your adventures for life on a ship. Thank you very much for having me here. You summarized pretty well. If oceans die, we are going to die too. That's why for 44 years now, with our ships, we go and save lives. We save as many lives as possible. Interdependence is our driving force. So we live in a planet that if you look at it from the space, it would be totally blue. 7/10 of it will be covered by oceans or seas. So the sea gives us the oxygen that we breathe. 2 of the 3 breaths that we are going to do together now depend on seaweeds, phytoplankton, phytoorganisms that I saw blossom in our seas with this bioluminescence. That's wonderful. And it's happening in the Mediterranean Sea. And I was admiring it last night. Phytoplankton is eaten by whales. So we interdepend from the life of whales. So Watson, our founding fathers, decided to save them without protesting or without starting dialogues with politicians. But we decided to act, to do what we call direct action, not violent, but on the field. So if whales die, as we saw with the bees, if the bees die, we die. If whales die, we die too. The direct actions that we take every day when saving lives is something that saves our future. It saves our interdependence with the planet hosting us. This huge blue sea that hosts us, where I work, thanks to UBI, this year and last year as well, we've become close friends. And thanks to that, we managed to do something that just a couple of years ago would be a dream. We have a new ship called Seatorn. I'm not on board the ship because it would be very difficult to have a good connection. I just landed 10 minutes ago. So I just landed from the ship, but until a few minutes ago, we were cleaning up the sea and we were trying to discard illegal fishing. It's a big problem. 40% of local fish catch comes from global fishing. I'm in the Mediterranean Sea at the moment, between Sicily, Calabria and Sardinia. That's the area where we are now working, and it's here that we work with the passion of the people who love the sea in a very aware manner, which is key in addition to interdependence as well as kindness. With kindness, we remove the equipment for illegal fishing that would otherwise kill millions of lives in some cases. And in other cases, they would generate a lot of suffering. Last year, we found a whale, a female, called Fury, as the fury that she felt against humanity that made her injured her. So this whale is a symbol. There is another whale who died, and I'd like to thank Ubi for this today, because it gives the opportunity to do something together to save lives, to save human lives and save the connection between humans and sea inhabitants. So we are all interconnected, so we are determined to save them and to save our future. Thank you so much, Andrea. The next connection will be from the ship. We really want to do that because we want to experience this saving lives from the ship. It's really important. Thank you very much. Good wind to you, and see you soon. I look forward to meeting you on board. Thank you very much. We will do so. See you soon, Andrea. Now, thank you, Andrea, again. And I now see Serena, Dr. Serena Talarico. There you are. Doctors in anthropology, intercultural experts. We talked about ecocentrism as an expression of interdependence, and we've discussed this until now. Now, currently, you deal with the separation between nature and culture, and you also work at Amala, a very beautiful project. Ama means woman, mother, and La, for all of us, is the affectionate recognition, the sign of respect that we have for our masters. Over to you, Serena. Thank you for inviting me. I'm very excited. And I don't really know whether I'm here as an anthropologist or as a Buddhist. A question that I've tried to answer for a long time. I found the answer. Anthropology and Buddhism are really interdependent. I'd like to quickly refer to the word anthropocentrism and give it the right historical and cultural context. The separation between culture and nature has a historical reason to be, and it developed around the end of the 1900s, also with a phenomenon that we know pretty well, like the Industrial Revolution. Also a positivist philosophy that put men or mankind at the heart and made it responsible for their destiny. But this is the story of Western thinking, which also led to a practical but also intellectual detachment between nature and human beings. We see it in nature over time, but also in human science, which is seen as a basin from which men could take resources, whether they were renewable resources or limited resources or whatever, it doesn't matter. The approach of men to nature was that of a subject and drawing from a reservoir. This concept has been questioned at the end of the 1950s by some anthropologists like Philippe Descartes, who focused on the interaction between mankind and the environment, not just in terms of culture or in terms of the ability to react in the environment, but also as nature can react. So we saw it during the pandemic. So we saw dolphins in Venice, animals, taking possession of cities. Well, we have an impact on nature, but nature has an impact on us. Thinking otherwise would be part and parcel of egocentrism. How can we act and think differently? First of all, changing the way we approach non-human beings. Philippe Descartes said that we, experts of human sciences, we have to start researching interactions with non-humans as social relations. We all belong to an ecological niche. Our impact is not from the outside. We are all part of the same system in an ecological niche, and non-human beings are partners, our partners, social partners. This changes everything, because seeing non-human beings or sentient beings, as Buddhists would say, as subject, make it possible to attribute rights to them and make it possible to consider them as peers. This puts us in a complex system of relations. This is a systemic view that we know pretty well in anthropology, which is part of Buddhism for more than 2,000 years. A systemic approach means trying to respond to a problem, not with just a unique reply to that problem, but considering the entire impact that we have on the system. That's the case with Amala, which is a result of a cooperation with UBI. It's a project targeted to women, refugee women, with a past experience of gender violence. It's a response, not just looking at the economic or ecological, physical and mental aspect of gender violence, but the goal is to also provide a response to the entire system and to the entire place. It's important to think of cultural elements as elements of biodiversity that have to be safeguarded. We conducted research and we found traditional arts, pure arts, that had a low impact on the territory, so they did not consume a lot of resources like the looms. We sort of generating a working system aimed at reducing the impact on the territory by recycling fabrics, for instance, with the awareness that you can have positive results also by taking care of your working practices, and the fallout effect will be on the entire social system with a view to integrating humans and non-human beings. Thank you very much, Serena. Well, Buddhists are ecocentric by definition. Thank you very much, Serena. We'll keep in touch also for our common projects. Thank you again. Thank you, Serena. I hand over now to Riccardo Belli. Hi, Riccardo, there you are. Welcome. Thank you. He's an entrepreneur, an innovator, a communicator, and founder of Italian Buddhist for Sustainability. It's an innovative startup. You're also into doing, like your colleagues who spoke before you, so you're very much oriented to action. You're an entrepreneur who loves listening to young people. We repeated this many times during our dialogues. And also you designed this format, City and Gardens Together. Will you elaborate on that? Yes, sure. Hello, Silvia, and welcome everyone. You know, requalifying urban greenery and taking care of it together with people, especially fragile people, and returning a better city to the citizens for a few years has become my job.
Yes deals
with enabling these sustainable projects. I will try to explain the ultimate goal of this activity because it's very much connected with everything that was said today, which was very interesting to me. The ultimate goal is to make it possible for nature to regain cement spaces in cities, and at the same time, fragile people need to find an opportunity to get into the working world, become active and regain their values so as to have a second chance of living, but in a totally different manner. Let me explain better. How did I get to implementing a project such as this? In 2015, the previous speakers talked about many years of work. I'm much younger in terms of becoming aware. In 2015, almost by chance, I learned about the Agenda 2030 and the 17 sustainable goals. At first, I read it very lightly, and then I understood that that could mean a really different way of behaving for all of us. And then in 2016, you may wonder why I have this date, 18th of February 2016, but that's a fixed date because everything changed to me because I became a father. The sense of responsibility took shape in substance, also physically. And so at a certain point, I tried to understand, really in line with what was said before, I tried to understand how I could pragmatically act differently from the past. And walking around my city, I live in Milan, I started looking at a very practical aspect. I stopped pointing my fingers against anything that was not acceptable to me. And I started pointing the finger to me. And I started asking questions because it was not possible that everything happened involving me, but not depending on me. There was something wrong here. So walking around the city, I realized that there were green areas that were not very good, not very taken care of. And then, studying and looking at the details, I realized that we were waiving the beauty of a good requalification because we were surrendering before the fact that it was impossible to do successful maintenance with the greenery. So City and Garden together originated from this idea of not wanting to give up what is beautiful. During the pandemics, I thought a lot, and I realized that before this project, I talked about fragile people as if it were just a handful. But now we've realized that everyone is fragile. We are all fragile people. So it's true for all of us. Giving an opportunity of work to people who do not have opportunities, not because of their goodwill, but because they cannot. I have a few flashbacks of squares that we requalified in Milan, and they were full of people who had given up a chance of living. These people, taking care of them, teaching a language, teaching rules that may result in their freedom, and allowing them to work in order to regain their dignity and make them responsible for a square gave a huge stimulus for living to me personally, but also to all the people who are now participating in the projects I'm implementing. The concept is walk the talk. I will never, put my face on those squares where we work. The idea is that if someone walks by and throws something on the floor, we walk by, pick it up and put it in the trash garbage basket. I walk close by, giving this example, I took a pot, I put some earth here, and I'm seeding here live because I want this to become a symbol of good luck, rebirth. And I'd like to thank UBI because they believe in what I did and will continue to do, because from Milan, we will now move to other cities in Italy. And with you, we will be certainly stronger. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Riccardo. We said many times that it's important to do, but it's also very important how you do it. So thank you very much. Now, we've talked about experiences of action or doing, but especially how to do. David Loy also talks about this. Sometimes faced with the ecological crisis, based on the information that we receive, sometimes we see terrible images of suffering. Our non-human friends sometimes suffer a lot. So it's easy to fall prey to the trap of reaction instead of responding. The practice lightens up self-polluting emotions of frustration and anger sometimes. It allows us to act instead of pointing fingers or blaming others in an attitude that after all is self-destructive, devices, and actually ineffective. So the invitation that we thought of throwing into you is for 3 minutes to just keep quiet and do some conscious breathing. Breathing comes from oceans and from the trees, as was said a few minutes ago. So now I invite you to spend 3 minutes to breathe consciously.
Bentornate e bentornati.
Welcome back. And so now we're going to go back to Sravasti Abbey.
Eccola, Tupte
And
Jampa.
we have Tupte Jampa with us. Hello.
Has been here with us today. Hello. I would like just to say a few words about you, and then I'll leave it to you. So, Tupte Jampa was born in Germany and met the Dharma in 1999. And she worked for a non-governmental organization that advanced human rights in Tibet. But soon also she discovered that social and political engagement are, of course, important, but not sufficient to an effective, deep transformation. Anthropocentrism Jampa lived for several months in a Zen monastery in Japan to explore the monastic path. And after many hours of meditation, that brought her clarity about the fact that a monastic lifestyle was indeed what would give most meaning to her life. She received her novice ordination in 2013, actually from Thubten Chodron, and a full ordination in 2016. So today, Thubten Jampa will speak about compassion in action in the Sangha. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for allowing me to share a little bit from our life at Shravasti Abbey, basically. So yeah, today I would like to focus mainly on monastic life, living in harmony with the environment, and how to be compassionate in the world, within basically living within those precepts that we are holding as monastics. So just as an intro, studying practicing Buddhism will lead to an understanding of our interdependence with nature, with the 5 elements: water, earth, fire, wind, space. And actually, I think the whole purpose of our life is to live in harmony and with the environment, and to be able to attain Buddhahood to benefit all others. So, but if we abuse our environment, if we are ripping ourselves off from the ground beneath us, that is feeding us, that is nourishing us, that is providing us a place where we can study and practice the Dharma, then we are lost. When elements are out of control, unbalanced, we suffer heat, droughts, storms of all kinds, as we know. And then it makes it very, very difficult to practice the Dharma, if it's not just then impossible. So therefore, I find Dharma practice should be deeply embedded in our, should be deeply embedded with environmental awareness. And before I entered Shravasti Abbey, I studied and practiced the Dharma. But there was a separation. I was studying the Dharma. There was me and the environment. So since I'm living at Shravasti Abbey since about 10 years as a monastic, I live within my precepts and within the environment. It's all combined. So at Shravasti Abbey, we are actually living the Dharma and in an environmental awareness. Buddhist actually means Nangpa in Tibetan, and Nang means inwardly, and Pa refers to the person who is working with the inside of themselves. And Nangpa is a person that deals with the inside, because real happiness is depending on creating the causes within, and to give up the causes for suffering that lie within us as well. So the Dharma is showing us how to attain happiness and avoid suffering. And the Sangha of monastics is of support on that journey. So monastics generally live a very simple lifestyle. We share requisites such as buildings, cars, furnitures, the kitchen, the library, the yard, the forest. So, and our clothes is of most simplicity. We have only 2 sets of robes and some extra clothing to keep us warm in cold seasons. We don't go shopping. We don't go shopping for food, new clothing, books, or something like that. At Shravasti Abbey, food is offered, and we share it with all who live here. And we have long-term and short-term visitors for period of time to live with us a monastic life. They don't take precepts necessarily if they don't want to, but they're learning how to take care of the environment, to be stewards of the land, to reduce harm and to benefit sentient beings. And that is not just a compassionate action towards ourselves, but all sentient beings. And that involves selfless acts. And sometimes we are not in the mood to benefit others. We are not in the mood maybe to maintain the forest, to ring green the meadows, or to guide sentient beings, to lead meditations, to maintain the buildings, or whatever it is. But it's for us a training as well. training in reaching out, to be open and wanting to benefit others. So, and in that process, we gain a lot of merit and we purify negative deeds, likely also negative deeds that we have done towards sentient beings and the environment, because we are part of that problem. So to support our aims, we took the precepts to hold the monastic discipline that is aiming towards personal liberation and Buddhahood. And there's no way to attain Buddhahood if we are still attached, if we are greedy, if we have aversion in our mind. And the precepts help us to accomplish that goal. But when we are living alone as a monastic, it's rather difficult. Or as David Loy mentioned this morning, you know, even as lay practitioners, if we are alone, we are pretty powerless. We have to join a community of monastics or of lay practitioners or other practitioners of any kind. A monastic community can support each other, and holding precepts, we perform rituals such as the annual rains retreat, meditation retreat, the posada, the bi-monthly confession, and that will all aim to gaining a deep, peaceful mind to attain concentration and insight, wisdom in the interdependency nature of things. And we can inspire others and support others on the path. So Sravasti Abbey is a role model for Western monastics as well as lay practitioners. At Sravasti Abbey, visitors can learn how to live within the Dharma and in harmony with the environment, maybe by joining our forest stewardship activities, by greening our meadows, by learning to build infrastructure in an environmentally friendly way, by recycling, or by removing or by avoiding shopping trips. To start with, how to do that. Our daily meditations help us to develop compassion and an understanding of interdependency. And this path is not always easy. We are basically swimming upstream. And therefore, living in an environmentally aware and compassionate community is of great support. It's like a powerhouse where we can gain strength to follow our innermost intentions, to live in peace and harmony, and to work for the benefit of all sentient beings. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jampa. Thank you for reminding us the importance of the Sangha, of supporting each other. That's so critical for our eco path, for our Eco-Sattva path, for using David Loy words. So I also should remind everybody that you are so, as Sravasti Abbey, so generous that you provide so many resources for us that we can also check in your website, and Sravasti Abbey. And thank you so much for having been with us. And
thank you.
All the blessings.
Thank you.
Ciao. Ciao. Thank you so much. And as we move on, we talk about, we have been touched already upon the importance of the interfaith dialogue. Faiths share a common vision, which is the sacredness of Mother Earth. The earth is sacred, the earth is holy. And interfaith networks play a pivotal role in directing global attention into environmental challenges, in enhancing awareness, and in providing vision and direction towards leaders. With Catherine Marshall. Ciao, Catherine.
Ciao.
Ciao. We actually met precisely walking this common path of the interfaith dialogue and action. Let me spend a few words about you, Catherine. I won't be able to tell everything about you because you have an incredible story, I would say, not just career, but a personal history. But let me say a few words. Catherine Marshall is a senior fellow at the Berkeley Center for Religion, Peace, and World Affairs, where she leads the center's work on religion and global development. She is a professor of the practice of development, conflict, and religion in the Walsh School of Foreign Service. Catherine helped to create and actually now serves as the executive director of the World Faith Development Dialogue. She is also vice president of the G20 Interfaith Association, which is actually where we met. And Catherine, who worked for many years at the World Bank, has nearly 5 decades of experience on a wide range of development issues in Africa, Latin America, East Asia, Middle East, and particularly in those countries facing the challenges of the world's poorest. So, Catherine, I want to thank you very much for accepting this invitation. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Sylvia. I'm deeply honored by being part of a remarkable and very visionary organization and event. So I wanted to start by invoking an ancient Greek term and thinking about today as a kairos moment. 50 years from now, I think we will look back on the COVID crises we are living today as a turning point in human history even. We hope that it will mark a coming together that serves to translate ideals of human rights, scientific brilliance, spiritual insight and yearnings, and clear-sighted awareness of our common humanity into bold action. My reflections today focus on the challenges and opportunities that confront religious communities, especially as they work in the harmony and pragmatic cooperation that interreligious dialogue aims to achieve. My hope is that we will look back to today's response as a kairos moment. This ancient notion from Greek civilization points to a special dimension of time. Kairos time offers a special moment of grace and opportunity. It looks to meeting challenges with spirit, courage, and conviction, and seizing the opportunity to change course. This COVID moment has starkly highlighted critical challenges, the fragility of life, weaknesses in approaches to fighting poverty, the devastating impacts of inequalities among and within nations, and urgent needs to improve delivery and quality of health and education. Too many conflicts that cause great suffering are linked to tensions among religious, ethnic, and social classes, and the urgency of addressing climate change is unmistakable to all with eyes to see, ears to hear, and concern for the future of our children and grandchildren. The calendar for the year ahead has many opportunities for bold action. These include the G20 summit hosted by Italy, the COP26 meetings in Glasgow, and the events with wide agendas from biodiversity to food to scientific research to education and to health. Let me focus on 5 points. Each draws on wisdom that Buddhist teachings reflect, especially within interfaith contexts. First, keen awareness of the global architectural scaffold of the Sustainable Development Goals with their deadline of the year 2030 and deep interconnections. Second, the fragility of peace. Third, vital links among peace, care of the planet, and a global ethical foundation. Fourth, some dilemmas that the dual realities of common goals and diversity present. And finally, the central critical need to address both care for the planet and for vulnerable segments of human communities. I have great hope that the G20 Interfaith Forum, which will meet in September in Bologna, can inspire and enrich these agendas by bringing to the global agendas that are largely shaped by nation states and secular institutions the minds, hearts, hands, and souls of religious communities around the world. The governments of world nations all committed themselves in 2015 to a complex agenda, 17 goals, 169 targets, and countless indicators that aim to measure and to jolt action. But the complex agendas with long to-do lists for one and all is interwoven. Each element is connected to others. This interconnectedness is reflected in a summary that we call the 5 Ps: people, planet, peace, prosperity, and partnership. It is striking that recent G20 hosts have focused on several Ps each year. The Italian agenda for the G20 is centered on 3: people, planet, and prosperity. The spirit of these 5 Ps challenge and reflect central agendas for interreligious action, demanding links among sacred and secular, women and men, young and old, and ecology and humanity. A central mantra of interreligious work is that there can be no peace without peace among religions. Interreligious efforts and institutions across the world return constantly to the ideal of peace and the pain that conflicts inflict. This is all too visible in the miseries of the most vulnerable, with notably at least 80 million people today forced migrants, new crises of abject poverty, and those who suffer domestic violence. Much religious action is anchored to the rock of the ideal of peace and reflects both awareness of bitter conflicts where there is some religious link and the rich capacities of religious peace-building work. But there is also a growing awareness that peace goes far beyond armed conflict. It is linked to, for example, inequalities, misunderstandings, and ignorance and corrupt practices. Third, there is much greater and wider awareness today that lasting peace cannot be achieved with both long and short-term disruptions and environmental destruction. Aggravated natural disasters and shifting ecologies force movements of population, climate migrants, and fuel misery. Environmental changes are linked to pandemic threats. In short, there can be no peace, no realization of human potential for flourishing and happiness without action to address the crisis facing the ecology. And this in turn depends on the awareness of interconnectedness and commitment to address each dimension in a coherent, generous, and compassionate way. These ways extend from urging action to the powerful to individual action by each and every one of us. Fourth, common values. Interreligious dialogue and action must recognize and build on what appears to be a tension, even contradiction, the reality and central understandings that we share a common humanity, but need at the same time to savor diversity. Balancing, reconciling this diversity demands a religious literacy, given that some 84% of people across the world have a religious affiliation, and these affiliations are rich and highly complex. The example of biodiversity and its rich interconnectedness and interdependence can serve as an example to interreligious awareness and sensitivity. And finally, some see a tension between the imperative of fighting poverty and human misery and care of the planet. True, the vital need to focus on both can present dilemmas, and it demands new thinking and action pathways. But there's no room to compromise on either human flourishing and social protection and action to arrest climate change. Indeed, they are intimately interconnected. The approaches of engaged Buddhists who highlight a commitment to justice and thrive on truth and speaking truth to power offer an example of balancing the dual challenges to people and planet, drawing also on the value of generosity and balance. The interreligious world is remarkably diverse. It has some great strengths and noble ideals, but it is also afflicted with some weaknesses. I fear that the goal of assuring harmony and laying the emphasis on common values can obscure the need for courage to acknowledge tensions and real differences. There is a natural tendency to focus on those who are questing and compatible rather than those who are at odds with people, ideologies, and goals. Power and politics distort good intentions. Global agendas and institutions focus sharply today on evidence and results, both of which tend to favor technocratic approaches. Ethical issues, moral values, and complex motivations can be obscured. A vital gift of religious traditions is prophecy, the need for prophetic voices, like the Buddha, that seek new realities and approaches, looking beyond deceptive language and bland, often flawed harmonies that sidestep real issues, need to be acknowledged and addressed with courage and honesty. We hear often today that no one is safe until all are saved. Of course, this insight is not new, but COVID emergencies combined with the dramatic capacities of contemporary communications have highlighted the force of this reality. A challenge of this Kairos moment is to translate this insight about interconnectedness and fragility into practical new approaches and institutions. That demands truth, courage to see problems with open eyes. Fighting corruption, discrimination, blindness to suffering all demand those prophetic voices. We need clear ethics, openness and curiosity, and value-driven leadership. Leadership without preaching and moralizing, that listens and hears, that is inclusive and driven by visions of a healthy planet and commitment to humanity and the potential of individuals and communities. In this Kairos moment, we need to link and benefit from each platform and event we have at hand to spur action. The opportunity of the G20 Interfaith Forum is a prominent example, nudging interreligious bodies and networks to translate the wisdom of the ages and their lived experience into the language of analysis and of policy. The Bologna Forum offers a special opportunity to combine the pragmatic and technical with lived wisdom and experience, looking towards the challenge of meeting the challenge of our times. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you for reminding us how important it is also the political dimension and the role that interfaith can play. I'm sure September this year, when we are going to have the Interfaith 20 Summit, is going to be a crucial moment to advocate for respect of all biodiversity, planetary and human. So thank you very much for being with us. We will have a chance to speak soon, I think. So thank you again for joining. So it has been a great journey until now, and going towards the end of this virtual Sangha, we are accompanied by a Buddhist practitioner since his early 20s, I would say, a human rights and civil rights activist, a committed philanthropist. Richard Gere keeps on drawing attention and practical resolution to humanitarian crises which are rooted in injustice, inequality, and intolerance. Mr. Gere was the co-founder and chairman of the Tibet House in 1987 and joined the board of directors at the International Campaign for Tibet in 1992. He has served as its board chairman since 1995. The Gere Foundation, which celebrates, I think, 30 years this year, awards grants to groups that are dedicated to addressing human rights violations throughout the world and the cultural preservation of Tibet and the Tibetan people, as well as to groups providing HIV, AIDS care, treatments, and research. Richard Gere is here with us today. I want to thank him for his vision, his deliberation, and his compassion. I'm sorry, mi dicono che non è ancora collegato. Allora,
Sorry, they're telling me it's not connected yet. So I did his introduction. I want to do the introduction again.
Oh, here you are.
Oh, okay.
Here. Hello,
Yes,
Mr.
hello.
Deere. Thank you so much for being here with us today. I already introduced you.
No,
And,
grazie mille.
Grazie moltissime.
Ragazzi.
Just let me thank you once again, as I said before, for your deliberation, your vision, your compassion, and of course for being with us.
Well, it's very sweet. Look, this is I'm sitting here in my house. I'm very, very fortunate to be living in nature. And we're in a big rainstorm right now. And it's very typical of spring weather, even that I remember as a child. So we're extremely blessed right here that climate change hasn't had a major effect. The winters have gotten not quite as intense as I remember as a kid. We used to have 6 feet of snow from late October to March or April. But now we don't get snow like that anymore. But things are thriving, and again, I feel very fortunate because I've seen what's been happening around the world. I did an interview yesterday and spoke a little bit to people in Gaza. And it was an organization that, UN organization that had been defunded by ex-President Trump, that was intended to help children who are living through an occupation and constant bombardments and violence. But as our previous speaker spoke, everything is interconnected. Our mindset tells us not only who we are, but what our future will be. If we don't radically change our thinking, if we don't radically take seriously what the Buddha taught us, we are doomed, clearly. And none of us want to see that happen, but how many of us really take that seriously and really assume that call to action? Very few of us, myself included. There's so much more that we all can do, so much more that we have to do. Every time I see a photograph from the moon landings and those lonely photographs of planet Earth floating in space, vast, seemingly empty space, and I think about the problems that surround us here, the personal problems, the international problems, the constant issues that seem so small in the context of a large universe of interconnection. We have to listen to the Buddha. This is the days to really listen, when we're celebrating the birth and the enlightenment and the passing of Lord Buddha. That he wasn't kidding around. This is serious stuff. This is the root of the matter. Are we interconnected or are we not? Do we pretend that we have eternal egos or do we not? Do we challenge whether or not we exist the way we appear to exist or not? If we don't, we're going to get more of the same until we destroy ourselves on this planet. The Buddha taught us to work on ourselves first. And I think we're talking to a Buddhist organization. I think everyone is practicing to the level that we're capable. the most developed of us on this planet, the Dalai Lama, gets up at 3 o'clock, 3:30 every morning and practices. How many of us do that? And yet we expect to be enlightened. We expect to transform our minds. That's not the way it happens. So I'm speaking to myself as I speak to you as fellow Sangha members. We can't fool ourselves that if we meditate a little bit and we find some level of peace and maybe some bliss once in a while, that we are close to enlightenment. It doesn't work that way. And the self-sacrifice that we're all called to is the only way we can proceed as Buddhists. The Buddha didn't want followers. He wanted liberated people. All beings liberated. I was thinking this morning about what I would share with you, and I know you've had wonderful speakers who have been speaking such wisdom and sharing so many things. I thought I would share some things with you, maybe a little more personal. My father grew up on a farm, and he was a man of the soil, and he still has hands of a farmer. Each one of his fingers is as big as two of mine. And he just had his 99th birthday a few weeks ago. And it was the first time we were able to see each other since COVID happened. And my whole family came together. But it was a moment of reestablishing human contact, but also because of my father being in the center of this, of reestablishing a sense of universal responsibility, which he always had. And I think people who live in the soil understand that the forces of nature, the forces of the universe are much larger than a personal ego, and that we're here to help each other the best we can, to the degree we can, to the quality we can. And my father just really seems to have that in spades. He grew up a religious man, but not a Buddhist. But his sense of genuine caring and the authenticity of his love and compassion is overwhelming to me. There's a very great teacher who I was fortunate to meet in the last years of his life, Rebur Rinpoche. I know some of you out there might know him because I think he taught in Italy from time to time. And Rebur Rinpoche, I was very fortunate. I was able to build him a house on my property where he did his final retreats. And there was a strange thing that started happening. This is a very peaceful place where I live, but all the animals start to gather around his hut and the house that I built for him. And every time I came to visit him, there were animals, and they wouldn't run away. They were quite happy, just hanging around Rebur Rinpoche's residence. And I remember one time I came up there, and his attendant told me, we have this visitor that comes every night, who comes to the door and just waits there, and we put some food out for him. And I said, it's a strange kind of cat. I don't know. It's quite big. I said, how big? It says, well, it's about 2 or 3 times the size of a normal cat. And I kind of drew a picture of it. Did it look like that? He says, yeah. I said, I can't believe this. It's a bobcat. It's almost as big as a mountain lion. It's a very large cat. And I've been waiting 35 years to see this animal. And it's been coming to see Rebur Rinpoche every night to pay his respects. I assume the reason is there's a pure heart inside of that hut. And that pure heart magnetizes peace and universal responsibility, the sense that we are all in this together. The people, the animals, the trees. Scientists tell me that trees in the forest communicate with each other underground. Even some trees that are damaged or undernourished are given nourishment from other trees that are connected. I think the level of interconnection we're only scratching the surface of now in terms of even, being able to measure these things. I'm always of two minds about trees and plants, whether they are sentient. I know there's been arguments in the Buddhist world about that as well. And that argument is powerful both ways. We're here for each other. We're here to love each other, protect each other, be a light to each other. If we have that in our hearts, then these issues of policy and politics naturally come together. But they don't happen on their own. We have to stay involved, and we have to do uncomfortable things. Buddhists, by nature, are not people with a lot of money resources. They're usually not connected to power wheels. But maybe we have to get out of ourselves a little more and get more involved. And that, I think, should be part of our practice. It's not fun always. It's not easy. It's against our nature. Most of us are kind of introverted who want to practice. But maybe we have to work with that. And maybe that will help us in our voyage towards liberation and freedom, to get out of ourselves and really put ourselves out there. If we have to, get involved with politics, get involved with policy, get involved with things at the highest possible level. As individuals, but certainly we can do that as groups. Filippo was telling me about a group that I was actually quite interested in, One Earth Sangha. I'm going to read it because this document, kind of the mission statement of this, I thought was really quite powerful. Cultivating a Buddhist response to ecological crises. We aim at creating a One Earth Sangha in Italy and in Europe along the following three trajectories. 1, advocacy work on the deep root causes of the eco crises. Support the global movement on the rights of nature, and in collaboration with the European Buddhist Union and with leading interfaith groups, carry out advocacy work towards the European institutions such as the EU Commission, European Parliament, Council of Europe, where we have the participatory status at the NGO conferences, which is really important. Number 2, education in collaboration with One Earth Sangha and grounded in the Buddhist tradition and practices, provide a hub for teachings, connection, and engagement opportunities as essential components to the spiritual path. Eco-sattva trainings and education. I like that. Eco-sattvas. I think it's very powerful. I want to be an eco-sattva. You want to join me in being an eco-sattva? I like that. Eco-dharma is number 3. In action, continuing support of grassroots organizations and projects. Unione Buddhista Italiana, did I pronounce that correctly? Pretty good? Okay. Will invest 100,000 euros to implement the above activities, in addition to the resources it already allocates to support grassroots organizations and projects. In 2020, 100,000 euros were invested in advocacy work with the European institutions through the support of the European Buddhist Union's action. In 2020, Unione Buddhista Italiana also allocated 9.5 million euros to support 60 environmental and social emergency projects, helping 90 nonprofit and 120 cultural institutions and organizations. Among them, Sea Shepherd, as well as eco-conscious beekeepers and protectors of pollinators, who also play an important role in social inclusion. Some of the projects supported by Unione Buddhista Italiana will be presented at the VESAK on May 29th, which is today. Unione Buddhista Italiana will also call the Sangha community to engage in 2022, coming up, in Eco-Buddhist Action Months with a series of concrete actions so that we can do together, that we can work on together. And we will find, the correct approach to be skillful and productive and actually make something happen. So I think that's something to lean forward into, this action in 2022. I think I wanted to also just talk a little bit about what's going on in the Tibetan Plateau, and I'm gonna read some of this from our own documentation at ICT. This is the paper that we put out on ecology. Part one of this is the Tibetan landscape and Chinese policy. This is a statement from an Indian researcher, Brahma Sheloni. Water has emerged as a key issue that would determine if Asia is headed towards mutually beneficial cooperation or deleterious interstate competition. That means China. No country would influence that direction more than China, which controls the aqua-rich Tibetan Plateau, the source of almost all the major rivers of Asia. The Plateau of Tibet holds more fresh water than any place on Earth other than the polar ice caps. But while the water in the ice caps is all locked up, much of the water in Tibet is accessible. This water goes to over 1 billion people in Asia and Southeast Asia. And at this point, China is controlling the source of that water. Most of Asia's biggest rivers, the Earth's largest river systems, have their source in Tibet. The Brahmaputra, or more accurately, the Yarlung Zangpo Brahmaputra Jamuna River, is sourced in the glaciers of the high Himalaya and makes the famous Great Bend, plunging through the world's deepest gorge to the northeastern corner of India, to the lowlands of Bangladesh, and its final destination out at sea in the Bay of Bengal. The Indus, which flows along the length of Pakistan, is sourced also in Tibet, while the Mekong rises high on the plateau and runs through China's Yunnan province, Laos, Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam, where the Salween River, in Tibetan it's the Gyalmo Gyulchu, is sourced in Qinghai near the headwaters of the Mekong and Yangtze, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Obviously, this is a health and survival issue, water, but it's also a security issue. Those countries downriver will not survive without that water. And China holds the source of that water in Tibet. And they are diverting much of that at this point to Chinese cities before it's able to get down to Southeast Asia. So this is a major, major issue. And clearly when people don't have water, there is conflict and there's violence and there's craziness. So this is something we all have to be aware of. The permafrost in Tibet, in the Tibetan Plateau, which has always been stable, is melting at a very, very fast rate. The climate change and the temperature rising is faster on the Tibetan Plateau than any place on the planet. One has very little access to Tibet. Obviously, I have not been able to go to Tibet in 25 years. We recently had a law put through Congress, which is reciprocity, which is if we're not allowed to go to China, then the Chinese officials who are keeping us out are not allowed to travel to the US. I'm hopeful that we can do a similar law in Italy and other places in Europe and countries of fair play. Reciprocity of movement, very, very important. With the reciprocity of movement, we can see what's going on. When we see what's going on, we can do something about it. So this is a very, very important issue. Let me see if there's something else that I wanted to say. Well, I think it's so appropriate for Buddhists to be talking about the environment and ecology. I mean, if there was a symbol in Buddhism, it probably would be the tree. Probably the most famous tree in the history of the world is in Bodh Gaya, the Bodhi tree, which protected our great teacher through that long night of facing the ultimate eradication of his ego. Enlightenment was achieved under that tree. And I think as a courageous warrior, the Buddha is still the one we have to look to, of out of the box thinking, genuine liberation, genuine embrace, complete embrace of non-ego and of interconnection. If we really do it, if we really work on ourselves and we really work together, we can have an enormous impact on this little beautiful spaceship floating through vast space. I'm coming to the end of my life, not this year, but I'm certainly at the last part of my life. But I'd like to be part of that movement with all of you. I'm really bad at organizing, but I'm pretty good at making a noise. So let's think to this next moment where we can actually do something. I think we're all well motivated. Let the best ideas come to the surface. Let's gather around them and make a big difference. I love you all. Thank you very, very much for having me here. It's been a great honor. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Richard Gere. And the earth was witnessing the Buddha as well. Thank you for sharing your intimate experience with your father. My father was a farmer as well, and he is more than 90 as well. And I really feel that. But the promise is that we are quite good at organizing, so we match, I think, pretty well with you. Yes, perfect. And thank you also for reminding us the importance of being radical and the importance of being engaged and the importance of our daily practice.
The Buddha was a radical in all possible ways.
He was.
He wasn't this peaceful guy sitting in the corner. This was a guy who really shook it up. He said no to all of the stupidity and ignorance. He said no. He screamed no.
Yeah. Yeah. We end up this day so inspired, but also so motivated to take action. Thank you also for reminding all the actions that we are going to pursue actually from tomorrow. So thank you again.
Keep me in the loop.
We will, definitely. We definitely keep you in the loop. Thank you. Thank you so much for being with us.
Grazie.
Grazie di cuore. Ciao. Grazie davvero, Richard Gere.
Thank you so much, Richard Gere. If there is a message that comes from this VESAK today and from the interconnection between the climate, environmental, and social crisis, is that we are all interdependent and that nothing is separated from the rest. It is not possible to protect human beings if we cannot defend the environment. We've heard everywhere and from everyone, and even from Richard Gere just before. We've seen how the heart of the ecocentric vision resides in non-separation. And as long as we feel separated from nature, we are thinking about nature as something that we own. And we are thinking about natural resources as objects that we can exploit. And we are going beyond any relation of reciprocity. So today we have seen
cosa può fare la pratica buddista
what
per
Buddhist
contribuire.
practice can do
Abbiamo
to
visto in
contribute.
tutti i modi
We've seen it in every
e
possible
dove
way,
può
and we've
nascere un
seen
terreno di azione
where there is
comune.
fertile ground for common action.
Si potrebbe dire
So we could say
agire dove occorre,
to act
quando occorre,
where it's
e
needed,
come
when it's
occorre.
needed, and how it's needed.
Ovvero
So
un atteggiamento che,
an
come si
attitude
diceva anche
that,
prima,
as we were saying
alleggerisca le
beforehand, can
emozioni autoinquinanti che
enlighten the
generano
toxic
divisioni,
emotions that
ma non
generate divisions, but
significa
this doesn't
non
mean
essere
that
attivi,
we
non
are not
significa non
active. This
essere
doesn't mean
vocal,
that we're not
come ci ha
vocal. Just like
ricordato Richard
Richard
Gere.
Gere
Non significa
reminded
non
us, it
essere
doesn't mean
radicali
not
nelle
being
scelte e
radical in our
nell'azione.
choices, in our actions.
Richard Gere ha detto delle
Richard Gere
cose,
said
ci ha chiamato ad una call to
some
action,
amazing things, and he called us to a
ed è la
call
promessa che noi
to
facciamo,
action. And this is a
ed è quella
promise we're
di
making.
agire in rete,
We're going to act as a
ovvero
network,
contribuire a creare
and we're
una
going
grande
to
One Earth
create
Sangha
a great
in
One
Italia,
Earth Sangha in
Europa,
Italy, in
a
Europe,
sostegno dei movimenti dei diritti per la
supporting
terra
movements
e
for
per
the
gli
rights of
animali,
the earth and of
gli
the
altri esseri
animals,
senzienti.
for other sentient beings.
Rafforzare, come
We're
abbiamo
going
visto, il
to
dialogo
enhance
interreligioso,
interreligious
anche
dialogue,
insieme all'Unione
like we have
Buddista
said, together with
Europea,
the European
creando
Buddhist Union
alleanze in
as well,
tutto il
by
mondo
creating this in
e
the whole of the
relazionarci
world
con le
and put
istituzioni.
ourselves in relation with
Anche
the
Richard Gere adesso
institutions.
ci ha
Even
detto
Richard Gere
quanto è
said
importante che
how
noi siamo dentro
important it
quelle
is for us to
istituzioni, ci
be
relazioniamo e
inside
parliamo
those
con le
institutions, to
istituzioni. In
be in
particolare mi riferisco
relation to these
alla Commissione
institutions.
europea, al
And
Parlamento
I particularly
europeo, al
refer to the
Consiglio
European Commission,
d'Europa, all'interno del
to
quale,
the
come è stato
European
ricordato,
Parliament,
abbiamo
and
anche
to
status.
the European Council.
E poi puntare
And
all'educazione.
also
Vogliamo creare
education. We
un centro
want to
virtuale
create
di
a virtual
Ecodharma,
center of
volto
Ecodharma
all'educazione, al training,
to educate
ovviamente
and train
ambientale e alla possibilità del
the
coinvolgimento di tutti,
possibility
quindi di
of
tutte e di tutti
involving
noi
everyone
sui diritti della
in
terra,
terms of the
perché
rights
la
of the
comunità
earth
è
and of the
cruciale
environment, because a
nel cammino
community is
di una pratica
essential
impegnata.
in
Il Sangha
walking
è il
towards
centro
a
della
pragmatic
compassione in
practice. The
azione
Sangha is a center of compassion in
e
action,
continueremo
and
naturalmente
we
a
will
sostenere
continue
con
to
impegno e
support with
determinazione
engagement
il
and
agire che dà
determination the
concretezza ai
actions
valori che
that
si ispira alla
are
saggezza millenaria del
really
Buddha.
making the values
Continueremo dunque a
of the millenary
sostenere
wisdom of the Buddha
progetti, alcuni dei
pragmatic.
quali
We
avete
will
avuto
keep
modo di
supporting
ascoltare
projects, some of
oggi,
which you have heard
attraverso
about
il
today,
contributo dell'8
through
per 1000,
the
quindi attraverso il contributo
contribution
di
of
tutte e di
the
tutti noi.
8 per thousand, which is
Permettetemi
an
dei
Italian
ringraziamenti,
taxpayer contribution.
perché la
So
giornata
I
di
would
oggi,
like
come
now to
dicevo,
thank
questo
everyone,
Sangha
because
virtuale nella
the
giornata
virtual
così
Sangha
preziosa per
that
noi
has united us today in this
è il
precious day
frutto
is the
della
fruit
collaborazione e
of
degli
the
impegni di
collaboration
tantissime
and
persone.
engagement
Quindi
of many, many
permettetemi
people. So I would like,
innanzitutto di
first of
ringraziare
all,
chi è
to thank
intervenuto oggi,
all the participants
Ron
today and
Icon,
all the speakers.
Filippo Scianna, Francesco Bicciato,
Ron Icon,
Edoardo
Filippo
Croci,
Scianna, Francesco
Anni
Bicciato,
Tupten
Edoardo
Chodron,
Croci,
Professor David Loy,
Tupten Chodron,
Alessandro
Professor
Volo,
David Loy,
Emilia,
Alessandro Volo,
Alessandro Morello
Andrea
e Sea
Morello
Shepherd,
from
Serena
Sea Shepherd,
Tallarico e Amalà,
Serena Talarico from
Riccardo
Amala,
Belli e
Riccardo
Sevigniamo,
Belli e
Annie
Seminiamo,
Tubden Jampa,
Annie Tupten
Catherine Marshall,
Jampa, Catherine
Richard Gere,
Marshall, Richard
la Gear
Gere, the
Foundation,
Gear
International
Foundation,
Campaign for
International
Tibet,
Campaign for
il
Tibet,
Tempio
the
Lankaramaya di Milano,
Lankaramaya Temple
Sravasti
in
Abbey,
Milan, Sravasti
Isabella
Abbey,
Ranieri e Barbara
Isabella
Annoni, che
Ranieri
sono state
and
le nostre
Barbara
due
Annoni, who
meravigliose
were our
interpreti,
two
che ringrazio
wonderful
veramente di
translators, and I
cuore,
really
che ci
thank
hanno
them from
permesso di
my heart. They
ascoltare
allowed us
degli
to
esseri straordinari.
listen to these
Ringrazio Stefano
extraordinary beings.
Bettera
I would like to
tutta
thank Stefano
l'UBI, tutto il
Bettera,
direttivo
the whole
dell'UBI.
of
Ovviamente
UBI
ringrazio tutti i
and
centri
all of the
UBI
board of UBI.
sparsi
I
per
would like to
l'Italia.
thank all the
Ringrazio
Italian Buddhist Union
Boiler e
centers in
Gioele e
Italy,
Bianca, che ci hanno
Boiler,
permesso
Gioele,
di
Bianca,
poterci
who
vedere
allowed
e
us to
ascoltare in maniera
see and hear each
virtuale.
other in a
Ringrazio
virtual
Edoardo Caprino
way,
e ovviamente
Edoardo
tutte e tutti
Caprino,
voi per
and
averci
all of
seguito,
you for being with
ascoltato,
us today, for
condiviso
listening, for
in questa
sharing
meravigliosa
in
giornata
this
insieme.
fantastic
Grazie e
day
davvero
together.
a
Thank you.
presto.
Thank you so
Speriamo di
much.
vederci tutti di
See you soon,
persona.
and let's
Grazie.
hope to meet in person again. Thank you.
දැයි නමස්කාරය කියන්න පින්වත් හැම දෙනාම බුද්ධං සරණං ගච්ඡාමි ධම්මං සරණං ගච්ඡාමි සංඝං සරණං ගච්ඡාමි ဒုတိယံ පි බුද්ධං සරණං ගච්ඡාමි ဒုတိယံ පි ධම්මං සරණං ගච්ඡාමි ဒုတိယံ පි සංඝං සරණං ගච්ඡාමි တတိယံ පි බුද්ධං සරණං ගච්ඡාමි တတိယံ පි ධම්මං සරණං ගච්ඡාමි တတိယံ පි සංඝං සරණං ගච්ඡාමි පානාති පාතා වේරමණී සික්ඛාපදං සමාදියාමි අදින්නා දානා වේරමණී සික්ඛාපදං සමාදියාමි කාමේසු මිච්ඡාචාරා වේරමණී සික්ඛාපදං ආකාසට්ටා ච බුම්මට්ටා දේවා නාග මහිද්దికා පුඤ්ඤන්තං අනුමෝදිත්වා චිරන් රක්ඛන්තු ලෝක සාසන ආකාසට්ටා ච බුම්මට්ටා දේවා නාග මහිද්దికා පුඤ්ඤන්තං අනුමෝදිත්වා චිරන් රක්ඛන්තු දේශනං ආකාසට්ටා ච බුම්මට්ටා දේවා නාග පුඤ්ඤන්තං අනුමෝදිත්වා චිරන් රක්ඛන්තු ත්වං සදා ඉදම්මේ ඥාතිනං හෝතු සුඛිතා වന്തു ඥාතයෝ ඉදම්මේ ඥාතිනං හෝතු ඉදම්මේ ඥාතිනං හෝතු සුඛිතා වന്തു ඥාතයෝ ඉමිනා පුඤ්ඤ කම්මේන මාමේ සතං සමාගමෝ හෝතු යාව නිම්බානපත්ති ඉදම්මේ පුඤ්ඤං ආසවක්ඛයාවං හෝතු සම්බ දුක්ඛා පමුඤ්චතු